She saved an arrogant millionaire from a plane crash, but she never expected what would happen next. Days later, an unexpected proposal changes her life forever. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Megan Baker, a 35-year-old paramedic, often said her life was tucked into neat compartments: early morning runs, hospital shifts, quick dinners alone in her small apartment on the outskirts of Seattle, and late-night phone calls to her younger sister, Emily. On that particular afternoon, the shrill ring of the radio in the ambulance sounded just like any other day, signaling yet another emergency. This time, it was a construction worker who had fallen from scaffolding at a downtown site. She kept her gaze steady on the road ahead, while Carmen Diaz, her longtime partner and a slightly older paramedic, calmly navigated through the city's busy streets. Car horns blared as they wove around slow-moving traffic, sirens echoing through the damp, overcast Seattle air. Megan's heart thumped in time with the flashing red lights, but she wore her anxiety like armor, focused, determined, and ready. When they arrived at the scene, orange-vested workers surrounded their injured colleague, all talking at once. Their frantic attempts to help only added to the chaos. Megan knelt beside the fallen man, quickly assessing his vitals. He was breathing, but he looked pale, and there was a distinct fear in his eyes. She offered him a reassuring smile as she slipped an oxygen mask over his face. "I've got you," she said softly. "We're going to get you the help you need." Her voice was calm, almost maternal, though her mind raced with professional calculations. Possible head trauma, risk of a spinal injury, internal bleeding. Carmen handed her the cervical collar, and Megan carefully stabilized the man's neck. He tried to speak, but his words came out shaky and incoherent. She pressed a hand gently to his shoulder, letting him know he wasn't alone. The entire rescue lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. By the time they lifted the injured worker onto a stretcher and into the ambulance, Megan was sweaty under her navy blue paramedic uniform. She could feel the damp Seattle drizzle seeping into her hairline, a constant reminder of the city's temperament. Carmen drove swiftly, and Megan administered an IV line, speaking calmly to keep their patient conscious. At the hospital, doctors whisked him away. Megan removed her latex gloves, exhaling a deep breath. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Another successful rescue. Another life placed in the hands of surgeons. For most paramedics, that was the routine. You saved someone's life, then moved on to the next call. But for Megan, the gravity of each patient's vulnerability lingered. She'd carry that moment with her, letting it shape her understanding of humanity piece by piece. She felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning around, she saw Nancy Collins, the head of her paramedic unit. Nancy's round face usually wore a look of steadfast determination, but this time her expression held something more: approval, perhaps even pride. "He's stable, thanks to you," Nancy said. "Good work out there," Megan offered a modest smile. "Just doing my job." "Don't undersell yourself," Nancy replied, folding her arms. "You've got a knack for staying calm under pressure. Keep that up." Megan nodded, though a subtle warmth spread across her cheeks. She wasn't used to open praise. Usually, Nancy's compliments were more reserved, but Megan sensed a genuine admiration that day. Carmen appeared, tucking a stray lock of curly hair behind her ear. "We're back on standby, right?" Nancy gave them a curt nod and walked off, barking instructions into her radio as she turned a corner. Carmen turned to Megan, arching an eyebrow. "It's always good work out there. Then we're on to the next." "Sometimes I wonder if we're supposed to process any of this," Megan shrugged. "We have to find a way to process it ourselves. That's the job, isn't it?" Carmen studied her for a moment. "Yeah, it is. But don't you ever wish you had Something more, beyond the uniform, the calls, the rushed sandwiches between shifts. For a brief second, Megan thought of a time she had pictured a different life, maybe with a stable relationship, a home with more than one bedroom, and weekends spent doing something other than sleeping off exhaustion. She thought of Emily, who kept telling her she deserved happiness outside of work. But Megan dismissed the daydream and forced a small smile. Sometimes, she admitted quietly, they walked together toward the ambulance bay. The city skyline loomed in the distance, tall buildings reflecting the late afternoon sun peeking through the Seattle clouds. Megan felt the phone vibrate in her pocket. Perhaps it was Emily checking in, or maybe just a friend sending a silly meme. She didn't rush to answer. Instead, she paused for a moment, breathing in the scent of rain on pavement. Carmen nudged her shoulder. "Let's get back to the station," she said gently. "We've got a few hours before the next call, if we're lucky." Megan nodded, her thoughts already drifting to the next emergency. In her line of work, she never knew what to expect. She only knew she'd be ready, because that was her life. Compartmentalized, focused, and, up to now, predictable. But somewhere deep inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that change was closer than she imagined. The following morning, Megan woke to the patter of rain against her apartment's single-pane windows. Seattle's gray skies were familiar, almost comforting, yet she couldn't shake a sense of unease creeping through her thoughts. She pulled on her uniform, grabbed a quick cup of coffee, and drove to work, passing by the waterfront where fishing boats bobbed on turbulent waters. The day started typically enough with Nancy briefing the paramedics on local calls. Carmen leaned against the edge of a table, sipping coffee, while Megan listened intently to Nancy's instructions. Then the radio crackled, interrupting the chatter in the station. "Dispatch to base. We have a report of a small private jet that's gone down near the outskirts of the city. Multiple emergency responders needed." At first, the words hardly registered. A hush fell over everyone as they absorbed the reality of a plane crash. Megan felt a chill spread across her chest. Crashes were rare, but when they happened, they were catastrophic. She met Carmen's eyes, both of them silently acknowledging the weight of this call. Nancy snapped into action. "Megan, Carmen, gear up. Take Rescue 1 and head to the coordinates. State police and firefighters will be there, but we need to be ready for severe injuries." Megan's heart pounded in her ears as she and Carmen rushed to the ambulance. The whine of the siren and the roar of the engine cut through the damp air, and the rain seemed to intensify as they approached the crash site. On the radio, fragments of information poured in. Private jet, possibly carrying a wealthy businessman, name not confirmed yet. She tried to stay focused on her paramedic protocols, but she found herself gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. Carmen, sensing Megan's tension, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Breathe. We do this by the book," she said. "No matter who it is, we handle it." Megan exhaled, forcing herself to remain calm. "Right. We'll do our job." Arriving at the crash site, they were met by flashing lights reflecting off twisted metal. The slick ground was strewn with debris, some parts of the fuselage still smoking. Firefighters worked frantically to douse the flames, while police secured the perimeter to keep onlookers away. A state trooper waved them forward, shouting over the noise of the rain and the hoses. "We've got one confirmed passenger so far, severely injured but alive. We think there might have been only 1 or 2 people aboard." Megan hopped out of the ambulance, splashing into a puddle. Her boots sank slightly into the mud as she surveyed the wreckage. She spotted a piece of the aircraft's tail with a sleek, stylized letter F. It struck her as oddly elegant for something so broken. Carmen grabbed their medical bags. Together, they inched closer to where firefighters were carefully prying open a crumpled section of the plane. Megan's breath caught in her throat at the sight. Inside, the wreckage was a man, partially pinned by twisted metal, unconscious. Blood trickled down his forehead. The firefighters had cleared some of the debris, but the final extraction was tricky. A medical crew from another ambulance was setting up triage nearby. Megan knelt close, shining a flashlight across the man's face. Even through the dirt and blood, she glimpsed a refined, if somewhat stern, visage. She couldn't place it yet, but something about him felt familiar. She and Carmen exchanged looks. They needed to stabilize him before any move. The man's chest rose and fell shallowly, an indication that he was clinging to life. Megan called out to the firefighters, "Give us a moment to brace his spine. We can't risk moving him without support." The firefighters complied, and Megan quickly pulled out a cervical collar, gently positioning it around the man's neck. She pressed her fingers to his carotid artery, finding a faint but present pulse. "He's alive," she confirmed, relief mixed with urgency in her voice. As they worked, a senior firefighter approached. "We got intel on who might be on board," he said. "We hear it might be Lucas Foster, the finance guy. He's big in real estate and tech investments. You know, the one always on the business news." Megan only vaguely recognized the name. She couldn't remember seeing his face, but Carmen whistled under her breath. "Lucas Foster. I read about him. Extremely wealthy, bit of a cold reputation." Megan brushed aside the details. "All I care about is that he's a patient in critical need." She turned her attention back to the unconscious man, carefully taking his vital signs. His breathing was shallow, his pulse weak, but still present. A jolt of adrenaline shot through her. This wasn't just another rescue. Plane crashes were catastrophic, and the stakes were high. She needed to act fast. She signaled the firefighters. "We're ready to pull him out. Keep his spine stable. On my count." Rain pelted them as they gently maneuvered the man from the twisted metal. Megan could feel her own heart pounding. She couldn't shake the sense that something significant was unfolding, though she wouldn't allow herself to dwell on it. There was a life to save, and that took precedence over every other thought. Mud caked Megan's boots as she led the effort to transfer the injured man, Lucas Foster, if the speculation was correct, to a stretcher. The firefighter crew stabilized the wreckage to avoid further collapse, and Carmen hovered by Megan's side, offering quiet support. "Easy, watch his left arm," Megan instructed, her voice firm yet controlled. She could feel the tension coiled in her chest, like a spring wound too tightly. Her mind raced with flashbacks. Images of her father pinned under burning debris when she was just a teenager, how powerless she had felt back then. She brushed off the memory. This was no time to freeze. She had to be the reliable paramedic she'd trained to be. Quickly, she checked Lucas's airways, then adjusted his oxygen mask. His eyelids fluttered but remained closed. "We've got a pulse," she repeated, trying to keep the tone reassuring, more for herself than for anyone else. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, Megan noticed the uneasy looks exchanged by the bystanders. Media vans started to roll up, and she spotted a reporter stepping out with a camera crew. Chaos was brewing around them. She and Carmen worked faster, not wanting to become the spectacle of the nightly news. Inside the ambulance, Carmen initiated a saline V drip, while Megan tried once more to check Lucas's consciousness. "Sir, can you hear me?" she said, leaning close. "Lucas, you're going to be all right. We're taking you to the hospital." For a moment, his eyes seemed to flicker and his lips parted as if he wanted to speak. But no coherent words came out. He simply inhaled a shaky breath, chest heaving against the seatbelt straps that secured him to the gurney. Megan could see fresh blood seeping through a tear in his shirt near the lower rib cage. She pressed gauze against the wound, glancing at Carmen. "His injuries are more extensive than I thought." Carmen gave a short nod, rummaging through their supplies. "We'll stabilize him en route. Let's keep his pressure up. We can't do any major interventions here." The ambulance roared off, siren wailing as it cut through the rain-soaked streets. Megan stayed by Lucas's side, measuring his blood pressure every few minutes. The numbers weren't great, but he was holding on. She tried not to let her mind wander to worst-case scenarios. Yet, the memory of her father's accident lingered at the edges of her thoughts. She had been only 13, standing helplessly on the sidewalk while a fire raged in their neighbor's house. Her father had gone in to help, but part of the ceiling collapsed, trapping him momentarily. Though he survived, that incident left Megan with an underlying dread of catastrophic events and an overwhelming desire to save others when she could. She blinked, focusing back on Lucas. He was older than her by a few years, maybe early 40s, with dark hair matted to his forehead and a faint line of stubble along his jaw. Even in his unconscious state, there was something guarded about his expression. She found herself wondering what kind of man he was behind the headlines and financial empire. "Almost there," Carmen called from the front, expertly steering the ambulance around slower cars. Rain streaked the windshield, and Megan caught glimpses of Seattle's skyline. The city lights glowed softly in the grey, as if reflecting the tension of the day. When they arrived at the emergency entrance of a private hospital, the staff rushed to greet them. Megan and Carmen jumped out, guiding the gurney into a brightly lit corridor. A flurry of doctors and nurses descended upon Lucas, asking rapid-fire questions. Megan answered them as best she could. Laceration to the left side, possible internal bleeding, unconscious on arrival but with a sustained pulse, approximately 90/60 on the way. A tall doctor with salt and pepper hair nodded sharply. "Take him to trauma room 2. "We'll handle it from here." Megan followed, at least until a stern nurse halted her. "We'll need you to wait outside," the nurse said. Her tone was polite but unyielding. Carmen placed a hand on Megan's shoulder. "Let them do their work," she murmured. Feeling a swirl of relief, fear and exhaustion, Megan stepped back into the hallway. Her heart still pounded from the intensity of the rescue. She looked down at her hands, noticing a tremor she rarely let anyone see. The adrenaline of the moment had begun to subside, leaving an uncomfortable awareness of how serious this situation was. Trying to steady her breath, Megan leaned against the cool wall. She closed her eyes, recalling the wreckage, the twisted metal, and the silent, unconscious figure she had pulled free. In her mind's eye, the scene merged uncomfortably with the memory of her father lying under rubble, smoke filling the air, sirens wailing. It amazed her how past and present could collide so sharply. Carmen broke the silence. "You okay?" Megan swallowed hard, forcing herself to appear calm. "Yeah, it's a plane crash. You don't see that every day." "True. You did well," Carmen replied, her eyes full of concern. "Really well." Megan nodded, appreciating the reassurance but not entirely absorbing it. Across the corridor, she noticed hospital staff bustling about, heads turned as they whispered Lucas Foster's name. She wondered if he had any family rushing to his side, or if he was as alone as he seemed in that moment. Instead of letting the questions consume her, she focused on what she could do next. She'd wait for the doctor's updates, fill out the necessary reports, and do her best to keep her emotions in check. That was all she could manage for now. Later that same night, the waiting room hummed with quiet tension. Megan sat in a stiff plastic chair, arms crossed, occasionally glancing at the double doors leading to the intensive care units. Carmen had gone to fetch them both coffee, but Megan doubted caffeine could cut through the fatigue fogging her mind. She was tired, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave. Something about Lucas Foster's condition tugged at her conscience. The staff at this private hospital seemed well-equipped and knowledgeable, but she found herself wanting to ensure that this man she'd pulled from the wreckage would truly be all right. Nancy Collins entered the waiting area, her eyes scanning for Megan. Spotting her, she took a seat across from her, posture uncharacteristically soft. "I figured I'd find you here," Nancy said, her tone more gentle than usual. Megan gave a brief nod. "I couldn't go home, not yet. I need to see if he pulls through." Nancy inclined her head in understanding. "You've done everything you can. The surgeons here are top-notch." She paused, a flicker of concern passing over her features. "Just remember, Megan, it's part of our job to accept that we can't control everything." Megan sighed, letting her shoulders slump. "I know. But I can't shake the feeling this is more than just another rescue." Before Nancy could reply, Carmen reappeared with 2 paper cups of coffee. She handed one to Megan. "I'm guessing we might be here a while." Nancy rose to her feet. "I need to handle some paperwork and coordinate with local authorities. The FAA will likely investigate. You two can stay, but if it gets too late, head home. We'll talk tomorrow." Once Nancy left, Megan sipped her coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. She stared at the drab green walls, occasionally catching glimpses of harried nurses rushing in and out. "Why am I so invested in this?" she murmured, half to herself. Carmen settled into a chair beside her. "Maybe because it's not every day you pull someone from a plane crash. Or maybe because something about him resonates with you." Megan frowned. "I don't even know him." Could be the idea of him, a wealthy, larger-than-life figure, now vulnerable and broken, Carmen suggested softly. "And you helped save him. That's bound to stick with you." They fell into a companionable silence until footsteps echoed down the hallway. A doctor emerged from the double doors, Dr. Paul Henderson, a tall man in his mid-40s with a reassuring presence. He approached them, a clipboard tucked under his arm. "I hear you're the paramedics who brought Mr. Foster in." Megan stood, nodding. "Yes, sir. How is he?" Dr. Henderson pursed his lips. "He's stable for now. We've stopped the internal bleeding. He does have a head injury, but there's no sign of permanent damage at the moment. We'll keep him in ICU for observation." A wave of relief flooded Megan. "Thank goodness," she said softly. "He was in bad shape." The doctor gave her a considerate look. "It seems you did excellent work in the field. Without quick action, this could have gone differently." He paused, eyes flicking between Megan and Carmen. "Mr. Foster is a known figure in the city. He has resources, but he's also under a lot of scrutiny. I imagine once word gets out, the media will be everywhere." Carmen groaned at the thought. "They were already swarming at the crash site." Dr. Henderson nodded sympathetically. "It might get worse before it gets better. On top of that, I'm not sure how many friends or family members will come forward. He's got a reputation for being rather distant." Megan considered the doctor's words. "I'll keep that in mind," she replied. "And if you need anything from me, details about the rescue or his condition on site, we'll let you know," Dr. Henderson assured her. "For now, go home and rest. Let us do our job." Megan and Carmen exchanged glances as the doctor headed back through the double doors. Despite his sensible advice, Megan still felt a compulsion to see Lucas, to confirm with her own eyes that he was okay. But ICU was off limits to unauthorized personnel at that hour. Carmen laid a hand on Megan's shoulder. "Look, I know you're worried, but we've done everything possible." "Nancy's right. We can't control the outcome." Exhaling a shaky breath, Megan nodded. "Yeah, I get it." They gathered their belongings, weary limbs protesting each step. The hospital corridor seemed longer and quieter than usual, the fluorescent lights casting stark shadows on the floor. Megan's mind wouldn't stop replaying the event. The burning fuselage, Lucas's pale face, the rain stinging her eyes. Each detail felt etched into her memory, just as her father's accident had been. As they exited the hospital lobby, a gust of cold wind greeted them. The rain had eased, leaving the air thick with moisture. Dark clouds still hung low over the city, illuminated here and there by distant streetlights. Carmen wrapped her jacket tighter around herself. "It's past midnight. Let's call it a day, okay?" Megan forced a small smile. "Right. Back at it tomorrow, I guess." Neither of them said much on the drive back to the paramedic station where Carmen's car was parked. Megan watched the windshield wipers flicking rhythmically, a gentle lullaby after the chaos. She wondered if rest would even come, or if her mind would keep spinning with images of Lucas Foster's battered form. When they finally parted ways, Megan slumped into her own vehicle. She took a moment to let the silence envelope her, pressing her forehead against the steering wheel. Another rescue completed, another life saved. Yet the weight of this particular call pressed on her like a reminder that some events can't be merely filed away as routine. 2 days later, Megan was back at the private hospital, dropping off a patient from a minor traffic accident. A small part of her admitted she hoped to catch an update on Lucas Foster. She told herself it was just professional courtesy, checking on someone she'd rescued, but a quiet voice in the back of her mind suggested there was more to it. Carmen handled the paperwork at the admissions desk, leaving Megan free for a few minutes. She wandered toward the ICU wing, uncertain if she'd be allowed in. The corridors were lined with soft lighting, and the faint smell of disinfectant lingered. A nurse passed by, and Megan cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said, keeping her voice low. "I'm the paramedic who brought in Mr. Foster from the plane crash. I was wondering if there's been any change." The nurse glanced at her name badge and recognized the paramedic logo on her uniform. "He's been transferred to a private room since last night," she replied. "You can check with the front desk to see if visitors are permitted." Megan swallowed, feeling a surge of relief and something else she couldn't define. "Thank you." A few moments later, she found herself outside room 406. The blinds were partly drawn, but she could see inside well enough. Lucas lay in bed, an IV attached to his arm, and monitors beeped softly in the background. He looked pale, yet more alert than she expected. Before she could decide how to proceed, Dr. Henderson emerged from the room, a chart in his hands. He offered Megan a polite nod. "Megan, right? I thought you might come by." She shifted on her feet. "I was in the building, just checking in if that's okay." The doctor nodded. "Lucas has asked about the paramedic who saved him. He's still a bit groggy, but if you want to step in for a minute, it might do him some good." Megan felt her pulse quicken. She hadn't anticipated that Lucas would even remember her. Carefully, she opened the door, the faint beep of the heart monitor growing louder as she approached the bed. Lucas's gaze drifted toward her, and his dark eyes narrowed slightly, as though he was trying to place her face. His hair, though cleaned of the blood and debris, was still disheveled against the crisp hospital pillow. A bandage covered part of his temple, and bruises marred the skin around his collarbone. She took a cautious step forward. "Hello, Mr. Foster. I'm Megan Baker, the paramedic who was at the crash site." His voice emerged raspy and low. "I remember you," he managed, the corners of his mouth turning downward. "You were there, pulling me out." Megan nodded, warmth flushing her cheeks. "Yes, sir. I'm glad you're stable now. How are you feeling?" He attempted a shrug, grimacing at the effort. "Like I got hit by a train." "Which I guess isn't too far off." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again, focusing on her. "Thank you for saving my life." She pressed her lips together, not entirely sure how to respond. "It's my job," she said gently, "but I'm glad I could help." He coughed, turning his head away for a moment. "I've been told I'm lucky, or maybe just well insured," he joked, a trace of dryness in his tone. "Everyone's in a fuss because I'm some big-shot investor." Megan studied him, noting the sarcasm. Being well insured is helpful, but having a pulse is more important. A fleeting smile crossed his face, so faint she almost missed it. True enough. She hesitated, glancing at the monitors. His heart rate was steady, yet something in his posture suggested he was restless or on edge. She remembered talk of his reputation for being distant, even arrogant, but right now he looked more exhausted than haughty. Before she could think of another question, a knock sounded on the doorframe. Dr. Henderson stepped in. "I need to run a quick check, Mr. Foster, Megan. You're welcome to stay for a minute, but keep it brief." Megan moved to the side, allowing the doctor to adjust Lucas's IV drip and examine his wounds. She watched quietly, reflecting on the oddity of standing here, face to face with a man she'd hauled out of twisted metal just days ago. The man behind the headlines was now pale and vulnerable. Lucas winced as the doctor palpated his ribcage. Then he turned to Megan, forcing out the question that seemed to weigh on him. Did anyone else get hurt in the crash?" She shook her head. "No one else was on board that we're aware of." "Only you." His shoulders sagged in relief. "Good," he breathed. Then, as if reminded of his precarious state, his expression hardened slightly. "I suppose that means I owe you big," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Megan didn't respond. She could sense a story lingering beneath his sarcastic tone, but it wasn't her place to pry. Instead, she nodded to Dr. Henderson, who'd finished his exam. The doctor gave a gentle smile, indicating it was time for her to go. As she headed out, Lucas's voice followed. "Thanks again, Ms. Baker," he said, words soft yet carrying a hint of pride. "I won't forget this." Megan paused in the doorway, offering him a final look over her shoulder. "I'm just glad you're alive, Mr. Foster." Then she slipped into the corridor, her mind buzzing with questions she couldn't quite articulate, and a feeling in her chest that told her this was only the beginning. 3 days after her brief conversation with Lucas, Megan found herself at the paramedic station, eyes drifting toward the clock on the wall. She was due to check in with Nancy Collins for a debrief on the plane crash rescue, but her mind kept returning to that hospital room. She couldn't forget Lucas's pale face, the way he had forced out a simple "thank you." It was unusual for her to feel so invested in a patient, but something about his guarded demeanor stirred her curiosity. Before she could overthink it, Nancy called her name from the far end of the station's corridor. Inside Nancy's small office, the sound of the city hummed through the open window. Nancy tapped a folder on her desk. "I wanted to speak with you about Mr. Foster's situation," she began, meeting Megan's eyes. "The hospital staff gave high praise for your quick decisions. They believe it made all the difference in his survival." Megan nodded, remembering the adrenaline that had flooded her veins in the wreckage. "I'm relieved he pulled through." Nancy's expression softened. "You know, I've seen you handle tough calls before, but you seem more engaged this time." She paused, clearly choosing her words. "Sometimes that's good, Megan. Sometimes it means we're crossing professional lines. I just want you to be aware." A ripple of self-consciousness passed through Megan. "I appreciate the concern, truly. I guess it just felt personal, yanking him out of a plane like that." Nancy nodded. "I get it. The rescue was extraordinary. But be mindful of your own emotional boundaries." She flipped open the folder, scanning a few lines. "That said, the hospital's arranged a small appreciation event for the paramedics who assisted at the crash scene. You and Carmen have been invited." Megan offered a polite smile. "That's thoughtful of them." After leaving Nancy's office, she found Carmen in the hallway, rummaging through a supply cart. Her colleague flashed a bright grin. "Heard we're headed to some kind of recognition ceremony," Carmen teased. "Think they'll serve fancy hors d'oeuvres?" Megan chuckled. "Maybe. And maybe we'll get to see Lucas again." Carmen arched an eyebrow. "Oh, planning on that, are you?" Megan shrugged, her cheeks warming. It might be good to check on him. That evening, she met up with her sister, Emily Baker, at a nearby cafe. Emily was 28, a marketing rep with a bohemian streak. She wore colorful scarves and had an eternal optimistic glow about her. Over cups of chamomile tea, Emily studied her older sister with knowing eyes. "You look exhausted, Meg. Is it just work?" Emily asked, tucking a lock of honey blonde hair behind her ear. Megan sighed. "I'm always tired, Em, but it's not just that." She traced the rim of her teacup. "I can't stop thinking about one of my recent rescues, Lucas Foster. It's not normal for me to focus on a patient so much afterward." Emily nodded slowly. "Maybe he made a bigger impression on you. Doesn't have to mean anything more than that." Megan twirled the spoon in her tea. "He's complicated. I heard he doesn't have many close friends, and the media portrays him as some arrogant billionaire. But when I saw him in that hospital bed..." She paused, recalling the vulnerability etched on his face. "I don't know. I just felt this pull, like he was more than a headline." Emily smiled gently. "It's okay to be curious. Maybe you're meant to be in his life for a reason, or maybe not. Don't force it." That advice accompanied Megan all the way home, where she spent a restless night, half wondering if she'd ever cross paths with Lucas outside a hospital corridor. The next morning, she arrived at the paramedic station and spotted Carmen loading supplies into their ambulance. "Ready for the day?" Megan asked. Carmen straightened up. "Apparently, Mr. Foster is being released soon. Somebody from the hospital called Nancy. He's stable enough to continue recovery at home." Megan processed that silently. For most patients, being discharged was a positive sign, but for Lucas, it meant returning to a world of business and media attention. She wasn't sure how someone so recently injured could handle all that pressure. Before she could ponder further, the radio crackled. A pedestrian struck by a car on a busy downtown street. Megan and Carmen exchanged looks. Duty first. They jumped into the ambulance and sped away, siren cutting through the city traffic. At the scene, a small crowd had gathered. A middle-aged woman lay on the pavement, her leg twisted at an odd angle. Megan and Carmen went into action mode, carefully positioning the patient on a backboard. As Megan checked her vitals, she caught the woman's quivering gaze. "It's all right," Megan said softly, pressing a comforting hand to the woman's shoulder. "We've got you now." Even as she focused on stabilizing the woman's broken leg, Megan's mind drifted momentarily. Saving people was her lifeblood, the reason she never walked away from a challenge. But in Lucas Foster's case, she sensed that saving him was only the first step in a much larger journey, one she was about to embark on, whether she intended to or not. The recognition ceremony took place 1 week later in a modest hospital auditorium. It was by no means glamorous, just a few rows of folding chairs, a makeshift podium, and a light buffet set up in a corner. Yet the environment buzzed with anticipation. Hospital staff, firefighters, and paramedics gathered in clusters, exchanging warm smiles and handshakes. Megan stood alongside Carmen, both wearing their paramedic uniforms, feeling a bit out of place. She glanced around, wondering if Lucas would actually appear. A few minutes into the event, Dr. Paul Henderson stepped up to the podium and cleared his throat. "Welcome, everyone," he began, voice resonating through the small speaker system. "We're here to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts made during the plane crash rescue. Without the swift actions of our paramedics, we might have lost a life that day." He gestured toward Megan and Carmen. Applause rippled through the room. Megan forced a smile, feeling awkward under the collective gaze. She noticed Nancy standing near the back, giving her a subtle thumbs up. Then Dr. Henderson's tone became more personal. I'm pleased to say the patient who was rescued is well on his way to recovery. He wanted to be here today, but had a last-minute complication in his physical therapy. Even so, he asked me to extend his gratitude to those who saved him. A small disappointment tugged at Megan. She realized she'd half expected a dramatic entrance from Lucas, but apparently that wasn't in the cards. Carmen, sensing her reaction, nudged her gently. "Don't look so glum," she whispered. "At least we won't have to deal with a media circus." After a series of brief speeches and a few certificates of appreciation, the gathering broke into informal conversation. Megan stepped aside, watching the interplay of doctors and emergency personnel talking shop. She sipped a cup of lemonade and mused on how quickly life returned to normal for everyone else. For her, though, the echoes of that rescue still lingered. Nancy strolled over, glancing around to ensure no one else was in earshot. "Megan, I'd like a quick word." They moved to a quieter corner of the room. Nancy's demeanor carried a hint of concern. "There's been some buzz that Mr. Foster might request private assistance at his home while he continues therapy. It's not unusual for high-profile patients to hire independent medical personnel." Megan tilted her head. "You mean like private nurses?" "Potentially, yes," Nancy said, crossing her arms. "But he specifically asked for a paramedic's perspective on emergency protocols, something about wanting the best immediate care if complications arise." She gave Megan a pointed look. "I suspect he has you in mind." A strange mix of anxiety and excitement twisted in Megan's stomach. "He hasn't contacted me." Nancy shrugged. "Maybe he's being thorough, or maybe it's just a rumor. But I wanted to give you a heads up, in case you receive a direct offer." Megan's thoughts spun with the implications. Part of her was intrigued at the idea of seeing Lucas's world up close, though it felt risky. "Thanks for letting me know," she said carefully. "I'll handle it if it comes my way." A few hours later, when Megan returned to her modest apartment, she set her keys on the kitchen counter and tried to push the conversation with Nancy out of her mind. She was used to routine, shifts at the station, the occasional evening out with Emily, grocery shopping on Saturdays, but the idea of stepping into Lucas's high-profile sphere was unsettling. Her phone buzzed just as she pulled leftovers from the fridge. The screen showed an unknown number. Curiosity spiked her heartbeat. "Hello," she answered. "Ms. Baker, this is Dr. Paul Henderson. Sorry to bother you after hours." His voice carried a polite urgency. "No, it's fine." "Is everything okay?" she asked, placing the container on the counter. "Lucas Foster's condition had a minor setback," Dr. Henderson explained. "He overextended himself in physical therapy. There's been some concern about potential complications if he doesn't follow proper medical advice. He's asked to speak with you. Would you be willing to come by his residence tomorrow to discuss a possible arrangement for additional care?" Megan's chest tightened. "His residence? I'd have to check with my supervisor." Dr. Henderson's tone was calm. "Nancy Collins is aware. If you're open to the idea, Mr. Foster would appreciate a conversation. He specifically requested your presence." Megan glanced around her small kitchen, suddenly feeling the weight of the decision. A swirl of emotions, curiosity, responsibility, caution, tangled in her thoughts. "All right. I'll come by." She ended the call and stared at her phone, heart thumping in her ears. She realized she'd just agreed to enter the orbit of Lucas Foster, a man whose lifestyle was worlds apart from her own. And though she was unsure of the reasons behind his request, she couldn't deny a flicker of anticipation. Perhaps this was the beginning of something that would take her far outside the comfort of her everyday life. The next day dawned with an unseasonably bright Seattle sun, as if the city itself sensed that Megan was about to step onto unfamiliar ground. She pulled her car up to a tall, wrought-iron gate guarding a sprawling estate located in the upscale Magnolia neighborhood. The gate swung open, revealing a long driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges and elegant landscaping. Megan's heart fluttered. She'd arrived in uniform, partly out of habit, partly to assert her professionalism. As she parked in front of a sleek, modern mansion, a uniformed security guard greeted her. "Ms. Baker!" She nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious about her scuffed paramedic boots. "Yes, Dr. Henderson said Mr. Foster was expecting me." The guard spoke quietly into a headset, then guided her through an imposing set of double doors. Inside, the mansion was a symphony of clean lines, glass walls, and polished floors that gleamed under recessed lighting. The space smelled faintly of fresh lilies, likely part of an arrangement on a long marble console table. A woman in business attire approached, Amanda Carver, according to the small name badge she wore. Her short, dark hair was styled neatly, and she carried a tablet. "Ms. Baker, thank you for coming," Amanda said, her tone professional yet polite. "Mr. Foster is resting in the conservatory. I'll show you the way." Following Amanda through the corridors, Megan glimpsed an indoor pool behind a wall of glass, a grand piano in a sunlit room, and artwork that she didn't have time to fully appreciate. She couldn't shake the sense that she was passing through a world she'd only seen in magazines. Finally, they arrived at the conservatory, a spacious area with glass ceilings and lush greenery. Lucas sat in a wheelchair by an indoor fountain, wearing a casual grey sweater and sweatpants. He looked more alert than he had in the hospital, but his face still bore the marks of recovery, a faint bruise on his temple, a guarded tension around his eyes. At the sound of footsteps, he glanced up. Amanda bowed her head respectfully and excused herself, leaving them alone. Megan stepped forward, noticing how the morning light caught the streaks of silver in his dark hair. "Mr. Foster," she greeted, trying to keep her voice steady, "I'm glad you're doing better." He exhaled, managing a wry half-smile. "Just call me Lucas, and I wouldn't say better is the right word yet, but I'm alive. You might be the one to thank for that, so thanks again." She nodded, noting the softness in his tone. "Dr. Henderson said you had a setback in physical therapy." Lucas shifted in his chair. "I overdid it. The rehab team wants me to take it slow, but I can't stand being immobile." His gaze flicked around the conservatory, as if searching for an exit. "Anyway, that's where you come in." Megan waited, her nerves thrumming. She recalled Nancy's caution about crossing lines. "I'm listening." He rubbed his neck. "I need someone who knows emergency protocols, someone I can trust if something goes wrong. My staff is competent, but they're not trained for acute medical crises. Dr. Henderson mentioned you're one of the best paramedics he's seen." Megan's chest tightened with both pride and apprehension. "It's flattering to hear, but I'm still on duty at the paramedic station most days. I can't just leave my job." Lucas nodded. "I'm not asking you to quit. I'm just proposing a part-time arrangement, maybe a few hours a day. Oversee my at-home care, coordinate with my rehab schedule, ensure I'm not doing anything stupid that lands me back in the hospital." She thought about her already demanding workload and the potential conflict of interest. But another part of her sensed an opportunity, maybe not just for him, but for her as well. "I'll have to speak with my supervisor to see if we can reach an agreement." "Understood," Lucas said, shifting again in the chair. Megan could tell it pained him to show vulnerability, but the desperation was there, reflected in his eyes. "If it helps, I'll compensate the station for the hours you can't be on shift. I can handle the bureaucratic side." A bird chirped in the lush greenery overhead, filling the brief silence. Megan studied him carefully. He did look stronger than before, but still fragile enough that pushing himself too hard could cause real damage. "I'll talk to Nancy," she said quietly, "but no promises." Lucas nodded, his jaw tight. That's fair. She took a step closer, adjusting her stance to meet his eyes directly. And, Lucas, if I do this, there has to be mutual respect. I can't help you properly if you won't follow medical advice, or if you treat me like an employee you can boss around. His lips twitched in a near smile. Fair enough, he repeated, though there was a flicker of his old arrogance in the way he regarded her. I'm not used to being told what to do, but for the sake of my health, I'll try. Something about the moment felt pivotal, like she was crossing a threshold. The bright sun overhead illuminated specks of dust in the air, and for the first time in a while, Megan felt a surge of anticipation for what might come next. Later that day, Megan found Nancy in her office, buried under a stack of paperwork. As soon as Megan mentioned Lucas Foster's proposition, Nancy's eyes narrowed with a mix of concern and intrigue. Part-time private care? Nancy repeated. That's not exactly standard for our paramedics. Megan nodded, taking a seat. I know it's unusual, but he only needs a few hours a day, maybe less, to make sure he follows medical protocols during his recovery. Nancy frowned. We're short-staffed as it is. However, if Mr. Foster is willing to cover the department financially to offset your absence, that could alleviate some of the burden. She flipped open a notepad, jotting down a few numbers. He's a wealthy man. If his support could improve our equipment or staffing, we might consider this arrangement. But are you sure this is what you want? Megan hesitated, recalling Lucas's strained expression and quiet determination. I'm not certain, but I feel like I can make a difference, and he specifically asked for me. With a thoughtful sigh, Nancy tapped her pen on the desk. All right, I'll discuss it with the board, but I need to be clear. If things get complicated, I'll expect you back here full-time, no questions asked. Understood, Megan said. Within days, the agreement was hammered out. Megan would remain on call at the station for emergencies, but part of her schedule would be dedicated to Lucas's recovery. The logistics were complicated, requiring more paperwork than she'd ever anticipated. A few other paramedics mumbled jokes about celebrity paramedic duty, but overall, the team supported her. When Megan showed up at Lucas's mansion with a small kit of medical supplies, she felt a flash of déjà vu. The same security guard opened the gate. The same polished floors greeted her inside, and Amanda Carver was there once again to lead her through the halls. Only this time, she was here as a hired professional rather than a curious visitor. She found Lucas in a spacious living room that overlooked a manicured garden through floor-to-ceiling windows. He was seated on a modern couch, wearing a loose-fitting shirt that exposed the edge of a bandage peeking out from under the fabric. A physical therapist named Jordan was removing electrodes from Lucas's leg, explaining next steps in a clinical tone. Lucas watched Megan approach, dismissing Jordan with a nod. Thanks, he said gruffly to the therapist. Then his gaze turned to Megan. So, you decided to join this circus? Megan set her supply bag on a nearby table. Let's call it a partnership. How are you feeling today? He tried for a light shrug, wincing slightly. Sore and tired, but I guess that's normal. Dr. Henderson wants me to do breathing exercises and limit any strenuous activity. She scanned his living room, noting how everything was orderly, almost too perfect. Before we do anything else, I need to lay out some ground rules, she said, folding her arms. Lucas cocked an eyebrow, mildly amused. All right, Nurse Ratched, he quipped, referencing a classic film character. Megan narrowed her eyes but chose not to respond to the jab. First, you'll follow the regimen Dr. Henderson and the physical therapist prescribe. No overstepping. Second, if you feel any unusual pain or shortness of breath, you call me immediately. And third, You have to let me decide when something's beyond my ability and you need hospital care." His lips curved into a faint smirk. "Fine. Anything else?" She glanced at him more softly now. "Yeah, you have to try and be honest with me. If you're in pain, if you're worried about something, say it. Don't hide it behind sarcasm." For a moment, Lucas's expression hardened, as if her words had hit a nerve. But then he relaxed, leaning back against the couch cushions. "I'll try," he muttered, rolling his eyes slightly. Satisfied for the moment, Megan set about checking his vitals. Blood pressure, oxygen saturation, heart rate. She noted each reading carefully. Lucas sat still, though she could sense impatience in the way he tapped his fingers against the armrest. "So, what happens next?" he asked, breaking the silence. Megan tucked her stethoscope away. "I'll coordinate with Jordan and your doctors. We'll form a schedule for your exercises, monitor your injuries, and ensure you're healing properly. I'll do routine checks, and if all goes well, you'll get stronger day by day." Lucas huffed, a mixture of relief and frustration crossing his features. "I'm not good at sitting still." "Well, you better learn," she said, not unkindly. "Your body's been through a lot." He glanced at the neat bandage that concealed the worst of his injuries. "I guess the alternative is worse." Megan nodded, catching the undercurrent of vulnerability in his tone. She realized that, despite his outward arrogance, Lucas was frightened of his own fragility. This assignment was shaping up to be more complicated than she'd imagined. Yet, as she packed her things, she felt a strange sense of purpose, as though she were entering a new realm of her career, one that challenged her in ways no ambulance call ever had. Over the next week, Megan developed a tentative routine at Lucas's estate. She'd arrive mid-morning on her days off, greet the security guard, and check on Lucas's progress. Then she'd review notes from the physical therapist and update any relevant forms for Dr. Henderson. One late morning, after she finished checking Lucas's blood pressure, he gave her an unexpected invitation. "I have a meeting with my financial advisor, and I'd prefer not to be alone in the house with him. Care to join me?" Megan blinked. "A financial meeting? I'm not sure how I'd be of use there." Lucas shrugged, wincing at the slight pain in his shoulder. "If I start to feel unwell, I'd rather have you close by. Besides, you might learn something new. Ever wonder what it's like to juggle millions of dollars?" She snorted softly. "Not particularly. I'm too busy juggling patients." Still, an hour later, Megan found herself in a sleek office that overlooked the estate's garden. She'd pulled up a chair at the corner of Lucas's massive desk, feeling out of place amid the leather chairs and modern art sculptures. A middle-aged man in a crisp suit arrived, introducing himself as Derek Sinclair. Derek carried a stack of reports and spreadsheets. Megan observed from her vantage point, noticing how Lucas's posture stiffened the moment Derek started discussing potential business losses stemming from the plane crash. "If you're not able to travel for the next few months, our overseas deals could suffer," Derek said, flipping through pages. "Investors want to see you in person." Lucas exhaled slowly, glancing sideways at Megan. "So, I'm supposed to jump on another plane while I'm still healing?" Derek hesitated, his gaze flicking toward Megan with an almost dismissive look. "Of course not. We just need a plan that addresses any concerns. Maybe virtual meetings for now, and a solid public relations angle." Megan sensed the tension in Lucas's body. She noticed the way he rubbed at his ribs, the fatigue creeping into his eyes. It was a reminder that, despite his outward confidence, he wasn't as robust as he might like everyone to believe. "Lucas, you need to rest," Megan interjected, her tone firm but quiet. "Stress will only slow your recovery." Derek looked taken aback, not expecting her input. Lucas, on the other hand, gave a tight nod. "She's right," he said. We'll handle the deals remotely for now. If any investor can't accept that, then they can look elsewhere. Derek forced a polite smile. Understood. I'll reschedule everything as best I can. After he left, Lucas slumped in his chair, pressing a hand to his temple. That was exhausting, he murmured. I can't stand feeling weak like this. Megan studied him. Weak doesn't come to mind. You're stubborn, yes, but not weak. His eyes flicked to hers, a faint hint of gratitude in them. Thanks. That afternoon, Amanda Carver sought Megan out while Lucas rested. They met in the expansive kitchen, where Amanda was pouring herself a glass of water. Ms. Baker, do you have a moment? She asked politely. Megan nodded. Sure, and please, call me Megan. Amanda gave a small smile. Of course, Megan. I just wanted to say I appreciate your presence here. I've worked for Mr. Foster for years, and it's rare to see him accept help, even when he desperately needs it. Megan leaned against the kitchen island. He can be a bit prickly. Amanda let out a quiet laugh. He's had his share of betrayals and corporate battles. It's made him guarded. I believe that's why he's so committed to maintaining control over every aspect of his life. Megan's gaze shifted to the hallway leading to Lucas's room. I can understand that, even if I don't agree with all his methods. Amanda sipped her water thoughtfully. He trusts very few people. I think he sees something in you, a straightforward honesty he's not used to. Megan felt a surge of warmth at the idea. She'd never thought about trust from his perspective, only that he was a difficult patient. I'm just doing my job, she insisted, though she sensed there was more to it than that. Before Amanda could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Lucas appeared in the doorway, looking weary but determined. I was hoping you'd give me an update, Megan, he said, leaning against the frame. Jordan's notes. Any changes from Dr. Henderson? Megan moved toward him, glancing back at Amanda, who offered a supportive nod. Sure, Megan replied. Let's review them together. In that moment, she realized she wasn't working alone. People like Amanda, professionals in Lucas's household, genuinely cared about his well-being and appreciated her presence. Allies in unlikely places, she thought, remembering her own sense of isolation when she first stepped into this opulent environment. They might not be friends in the conventional sense, but they shared a common goal, to see Lucas fully recovered, both in body and perhaps in spirit. One crisp Saturday morning, Megan arrived at the estate to find Lucas pacing in the living room, clearly agitated. A news channel on the large TV showed a headline about the plane crash investigation, mentioning mechanical failures and potential pilot error. The report speculated that Lucas Foster's own demands for quick travel might have contributed to the incident. He muted the television in frustration. They have no clue what they're talking about, he snapped. I never pressured anyone to rush. I pay good money for reliable planes and competent pilots. Megan watched him, noticing how his anxiety manifested in shallow breaths. She approached calmly. Take it easy. Overexerting yourself will only strain your injuries. He brushed her concern aside. I'm fine. This media nonsense is infuriating. They're implying it's my fault. She could see the tension building in his shoulders. The best thing you can do is focus on your recovery. Let your legal team handle these rumors. Lucas turned on her, voice sharp. You don't think I know that? It's my reputation they're dragging through the mud. My company's stock is already dropping because investors think I'm reckless. Megan stepped back, unprepared for his burst of anger. She reminded herself of Nancy's warning about professional boundaries. I understand you're upset, but I'm here to help you physically recover, not to fix your PR problems. His eyes flashed. That's all you see this as? A body that needs patching up? She took a steadying breath, her own frustration rising. You hired me to make sure you follow the medical regimen, and yes, that's what I'm trained for. I'm not your publicist. Lucas looked away, jaw tight. Right. Of course. Silence hung between them, charged with unresolved tension. Megan found herself torn between wanting to comfort him and needing to maintain her professional stance. She decided on a more compassionate approach. I know it's hard to see these headlines, but you're still alive and healing. That counts for something. He let out a slow exhale, shoulders slumping slightly. I'm sorry, he finally muttered. I shouldn't take it out on you. Megan hesitated, acknowledging his apology with a small nod. I get it. Just let's manage the stress before it messes with your health. Lucas's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's my ex-fiancée, Elena. We haven't spoken in ages. Probably saw the news about the crash. Megan pretended not to notice the flicker of hurt in his eyes. Do you want me to give you privacy? He shook his head. No, it can wait. He silenced the phone, then turned toward her. Let's get the daily routine over with. Blood pressure, bandage check, whatever else you need. The morning's tension lingered as Megan led him through his exercises, ensuring he didn't strain his healing ribs. She noticed the way he clenched his jaw when certain moves caused discomfort, but he never asked her to stop. Stubborn pride, she thought, typical of a man unaccustomed to vulnerability. After wrapping up the regimen, they ended in a sitting room, where Megan rechecked his vitals. While she recorded the readings, Lucas stared out the window at the cloudy sky. They're right about one thing, he muttered, more to the window than to her. I always move fast. Maybe I push too hard sometimes, but that's how I've built everything I have. Megan lowered the clipboard. Doesn't mean you caused the crash, he huffed, turning back to her. You trust me on that. She studied him for a moment, remembering the desperation in his eyes when she'd found him in the twisted remains of his jet. I wasn't on that plane, so I can't say for sure, but I do know no one chooses to crash. He nodded, his posture relaxing fractionally. If only the media saw it that way. Stepping back, Megan gathered her supplies. Take a break, rest, and please don't watch the news on repeat. It won't do you any favors. Lucas chuckled wryly. I'll try. By the way, you're way too calm under pressure. I'm not used to that. She offered a faint smile. Occupational hazard, I suppose. As she headed out to her car, Megan felt a swirling mix of emotions. The tension between them had flared like a sudden storm, yet she sensed it stemmed from his deep-seated fears. That first clash with his ingrained arrogance felt like a threshold crossed. He'd revealed not just pride, but a thread of genuine insecurity. In a strange way, it made him more human to her, and she wondered if it was the beginning of a deeper, more complicated dynamic. Megan arrived at Lucas's estate on a warm, overcast morning, her mind cluttered by thoughts of how quickly the dynamic between them had shifted. In the few weeks she'd been working part-time at his home, he'd shown flashes of genuine vulnerability beneath layers of pride. Their first major argument still echoed in her head, his frustration at the media coverage, her insistence that he focus on healing. She couldn't deny the sense they were both on a path neither had fully anticipated. She found him in the living room, standing by a broad window that overlooked the estate's landscaped garden. He wore a loose, short-sleeved shirt that revealed the fading bruises on his arms. He no longer needed the wheelchair on most days, but he walked stiffly, favoring his left side. As she set her medical bag on a nearby chair, Lucas turned, a determined crease in his brow. Jordan wants me to start using the treadmill, he announced, voice tight with a mixture of reluctance and pride. He says it'll help me regain stamina. Megan nodded, flipping open a folder of notes from the physical therapist. Yes, but we'll keep it slow, 5 to 10 minutes at a time, and not too fast. You're still recovering. She paused, eyeing him. Think you can handle that? He exhaled, a soft chuckle escaping. I can handle it. Question is whether I can stand the boredom. Megan was about to respond when Amanda Carver, Lucas's personal assistant, came into the room holding a mobile phone. Sorry to interrupt, she said, glancing between them. Mr. Foster, I have your lawyer on the line. Apparently there's a new statement from the FAA about the crash investigation. Lucas's face hardened. Great, he muttered, taking the phone from Amanda. Let's hear it. Megan gave him a meaningful look. We can pause the therapy talk until you finish, but remember, no stress spikes if you can avoid it. He didn't reply, already turning away to speak with his attorney in hushed, urgent tones. Concern flickered in Megan's eyes. These ongoing investigations and the media speculation remained a constant weight on his shoulders. She watched as he paced the length of the living room, pressing a hand against his ribs when he turned too fast. After a few minutes, Lucas ended the call with a frustrated sigh. They're still trying to determine if pilot error was involved, he told Megan, jaw clenched. But rumor has it, someone's pushing the narrative that I forced the pilot to fly in questionable conditions to keep my schedule. Megan frowned. Was that true? He shook his head vehemently. No, I always push for efficiency, but I never tell my pilots to risk safety. People want a scapegoat, I guess. She placed a hand on his forearm, feeling the tension in his muscles. It might be best to leave the blame game to the lawyers and investigators. You have enough on your plate with rehab. Lucas studied her, his expression softening slightly. I'm not used to letting others fight my battles. Then think of it as a necessary adjustment, she said quietly. Now, come on. Let's head to the treadmill before your mood sours any further. They moved to the mansion's private gym, a glass-walled space overlooking the gardens. A sleek treadmill stood among other top-of-the-line exercise machines. Lucas approached it with the air of a man preparing for a dull but necessary task. Megan helped him strap a heart rate monitor onto his wrist, then started the treadmill at a slow pace. Begin at a comfortable walk, she instructed. We'll watch your vitals closely. For the first few minutes, Lucas walked without complaint, focusing on placing each footstep carefully. Megan hovered near the controls, ready to hit the emergency stop if needed. She studied his posture, noting the subtle wince when he swung his left leg forward. How's the pain? She asked. Bearable, he responded tersely. After a pause, he added, Thanks for being here. Jordan does his part, but he's in and out. You're consistent, she offered a small smile. I'm glad to help. The rhythmic hum of the treadmill filled the pause in conversation. She found it surprisingly comfortable to stand beside him, each passing moment strengthening the sense that they were working as a team. Just then, the gym door slid open, and Emily Baker stepped in, looking sheepish but curious. Hey, Meg, she said, giving a small wave. I dropped by the station and Nancy said you'd be here. Hope it's okay that I popped in. Megan blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected her sister to show up unannounced, but she felt an immediate warmth at Emily's presence. Of course, Lucas, this is my sister. Emily. Lucas slowed the treadmill to a stop and turned to Emily, breathing heavily but forcing a polite smile. Nice to meet you. Emily's eyes danced with enthusiasm as she responded. Likewise. You're lucky to have my sister on your side. She's the best paramedic around. Lucas chuckled dryly, stepping off the treadmill with Megan's help. So I've heard. Emily's gaze flitted around the lavish gym. Wow, this place is incredible. Didn't realize Seattle had hidden palaces like this. She then turned to Megan, her expression growing more serious. I also wanted to see how you're doing. You've been quieter than usual lately. Megan felt a gentle tug in her chest, reminded of her sister's concern. She'd been pouring so much energy into Lucas's recovery, she hadn't truly checked in with Emily or even fully considered her own emotional state. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice came out less convincing than she intended. Lucas cleared his throat, sensing the personal vibe. "I'll just, go grab some water." "Feel free to look around." He walked off, favoring his sore side, leaving Megan and Emily alone in the bright gym. Emily immediately squeezed her older sister's arm. "He seems complicated," she whispered. Megan nodded, glancing after him. "Very, but there's more to him than the headlines suggest." Emily studied her intently. "You're in deeper than you realize, aren't you?" Megan opened her mouth to protest, but closed it without speaking. Emily's question lingered in the air, uncomfortably true. The ties between Megan and Lucas might still be hidden and unspoken, but they were steadily growing stronger with each day of shared challenges. That evening, Megan treated her sister to coffee at a cozy, old-fashioned cafe near the waterfront. Sea salt tinged the breeze, and the glow from vintage lamps gave the place a warm ambiance. Emily settled into a cushioned chair across from Megan, her eyes brimming with curiosity. "So," Emily began, stirring sugar into her latte, "are you going to tell me more about this Lucas? And don't just say he's a patient." Megan sighed, brushing her hair behind her ears. "He is a patient, but yes, it's more complicated." She paused, considering how to word her thoughts. "He hired me to oversee his recovery. I still do my regular paramedic shifts, but on days off, I'm at his house helping with rehab. He's strong-willed, and sometimes he's downright rude, but he's also vulnerable right now." Emily took a sip of her drink. "Vulnerable can be appealing, especially to someone as caring as you, but you have to be careful, Meg." "What do you mean?" Megan asked, though a part of her already knew. "Mixing personal feelings with professional duty can get messy. You might find yourself sacrificing your own well-being or risk your career if you're not careful." Emily's voice was gentle but firm. Megan nodded, recalling Nancy's warnings. "I've tried to keep it professional, but he's lonely, Emily. He's got employees like Amanda. He's got a doctor, a physical therapist, but no one truly close. He rarely mentions family or friends. The only contact I've seen is his business advisor and that ex-fiancée, Elena, who never actually shows up." Emily reached across the table, covering Megan's hand. "Sometimes people are alone for good reasons. Maybe they pushed people away. Don't let his loneliness pull you into a situation you'll regret." Megan swallowed, the knot in her throat betraying how unsettled she felt. "He asked me for something more, someone who can be honest, who won't just cater to his every whim. I guess I fill that gap right now." They finished their coffee discussing lighter topics. Emily's new marketing campaign, a friend's wedding. But the unspoken concern hung in the air. By the time they parted ways, Megan had plenty to mull over. The next day, she arrived at the mansion to find Lucas in the middle of a heated argument with a man she recognized, Derek Sinclair, his financial advisor. Derek's voice carried through the main foyer. "Lucas, if you don't handle this lawsuit claim swiftly, we risk a lengthy court battle." Lucas, seated stiffly on a velvet couch, noticed Megan's approach and shot Derek a glare. "I told you, I'll address it, but the FAA investigation is still ongoing." "I'm not about to pay out massive settlements on rumor alone." Derek threw his hands up. "They'll paint you as the arrogant billionaire who gambled with safety." Megan cleared her throat, stepping closer. "Is everything all right?" she asked cautiously. Derek spun around, startled. "Oh, Miss Baker, maybe you can convince him to face reality." He turned back to Lucas, exasperated. "This is serious. If you deny or ignore these claims, the media will bury you." Investors are already jittery. Look at what happened to the stock after the last scandal." "That was different," Lucas bit out, "and I don't appreciate you telling my paramedic how to handle my legal matters." Megan held up her hands. "I'm not here to get involved in your business affairs," she said, trying to keep her tone calm. "But stress won't help your recovery, Lucas." Derek huffed. "Exactly. So maybe you can talk some sense into him." With that, he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, leaving an awkward silence behind. Lucas's shoulders slumped. Megan could see lines of worry etched on his face. "I don't need you to fix my problems," he muttered, eyes distant. She stepped forward, taking a seat in a chair across from him. "I know, but ignoring them won't make them vanish, and you're clearly upset." He laughed bitterly. "Upset doesn't cover it. I'm tired of being portrayed as a villain. It's not my fault the plane went down." Megan studied him. "I believe you, but you might need to come to terms with what people think and decide if you're going to fight legally or settle. Either way, your health can't take all this back and forth." He averted his gaze. For a moment, she thought he might snap at her again, but instead he simply sighed. "It's hard to separate my pride from my reality right now." His words struck a chord, reminding Megan of her own past, how she'd stayed in a toxic relationship far longer than she should have, too proud to admit she needed help. Sometimes, clinging to pride only deepened wounds. She glanced at his bandaged side, noticing how he pressed a hand against it whenever frustration welled. "Your body's still healing," she said softly. "It's telling you to slow down. Maybe you should listen." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'll try, but it won't be easy." When he lifted his gaze to hers, there was an unguarded sincerity. "Thank you for not treating me like the bad guy." A flush of empathy warmed her chest. She thought of Emily's warning, of Nancy's caution. There was a precarious line between caring for him as a patient and caring for him as a person. For now, she could only hope she was walking that line wisely. A week later, Megan found herself on the estate's rear terrace, preparing to lead Lucas through a set of breathing exercises. It was a mild, sunny afternoon, rare for Seattle, and the gardens below were dotted with bright spring blooms. She insisted that fresh air might ease his tension, so they'd set up a comfortable chair for him outside. Lucas stood near the terrace railing, watching a groundskeeper mow the distant lawn. He rested both hands on the rail, as if testing his own stability. "You sure the exercises have to be done here?" he asked. Megan nodded, slipping a pulse oximeter onto his finger. "You need calm surroundings, and nature helps, trust me. Now, slowly inhale through your nose." He complied, chest expanding with a slight shudder. She counted slowly, then instructed him to exhale. They repeated the process several times, but on the fourth cycle, his breathing turned ragged. Alarmed, Megan reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Are you all right?" He clutched his ribs, grimacing, just a twinge of pain. Anger flashed in his eyes, aimed at himself. "I hate this feeling, like every breath is a chore." Megan tried to maintain a steady composure. "Your lungs were bruised in the crash. It's going to take time. Pushing too hard won't speed it up." Before he could respond, the terrace doors opened. Amanda Carver stepped out, her face drawn. "Lucas, Miss Baker, there's someone here to see you." Lucas stiffened. "Who?" "Elena," Amanda said softly. Megan felt a knot form in her stomach. She'd heard the name before, his ex-fiancé. The tension rolling off Lucas's frame was almost palpable. "Send her away," he muttered, turning his back to the door. Amanda hesitated. "She insists, says it's important. I could have security escort her out." "No," Lucas relented, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Let her in, but just for a moment." Megan realized she was holding her breath. She'd been curious about Elena. Yet now she found herself dreading the drama that might follow. A tall, elegant woman in designer heels emerged from the terrace doors, the click of her footsteps echoing on the stone tiles. Her long, dark hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and she wore a fitted blazer that accentuated her poised demeanor. "Lucas," Eleanor said in a voice that held both confidence and a tremor of nerves. "I heard about your accident. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." Lucas turned slowly, leaning heavily on the railing. "You shouldn't have come at all," he replied, tone clipped. Megan took a step back, instinctively giving them space. Elena's eyes flicked toward Megan, registering her presence. An almost imperceptible frown crossed Elena's face before she returned her attention to Lucas. "I was worried. Despite how things ended, I still care about your well-being." Lucas scoffed. "I can't imagine you're here just to offer sympathy." Elena pursed her lips. "I also wanted to talk about us, or what's left of us." She shot a glance at Megan. "Could we speak privately?" Megan made a move to leave, but Lucas raised a hand, stopping her. "No. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Megan." His voice carried a defiance that bordered on bitterness. "She's the one who saved my life. I trust her." Elena's eyes narrowed slightly, but she forced a polite smile. "Fine. I regret ending things the way we did. I've spent a lot of time reflecting, and I realize I might have overreacted to the situation with your business. You were under stress, and I felt neglected. I left because I couldn't handle being second place to your empire." Lucas's jaw tightened. "And now?" She took a measured step closer. "Now I'm here, wondering if we can mend bridges." She reached out, lightly touching his hand on the railing. "I care about you." Megan watched, uneasy, as Lucas stared at Elena's hand. For a moment, she thought he might accept the olive branch. But then he pulled away, leaning back with a grimace of pain. "My recovery is complicated enough. And let's be honest, Elena, our relationship was built on expectations that neither of us could meet." Elena's composure wavered. Her voice quivered as she said, "But I heard the rumors about the crash being caused by your haste. I figured maybe you needed someone who understands you." Lucas's face hardened. "You mean you think I need a savior now that my company's in hot water? Or do you just want to salvage your own image by playing the supportive ex? Either way, it's too late." Elena flinched. Her eyes flashed with hurt and indignation. "That's not fair." "I don't think fairness matters here," Lucas answered, lowering himself into the chair Megan had brought out. He pressed a hand to his ribs, trying to steady his breathing. "You left me when I was on top of the world. Now that I'm stuck in this state, you want back in. It doesn't work that way." Elena's expression shifted to a mask of controlled anger. "If that's how you feel, I won't stay." She turned on her heel, sparing one final look at Megan. A flicker of suspicion crossed Elena's gaze, an unspoken question about Megan's role. Without another word, she left. The terrace fell silent, save for the distant hum of a lawnmower. Megan laid a hand on Lucas's shoulder, hesitant. He said nothing, staring at the garden as though the vibrant flowers offered no consolation. Finally, he exhaled a shaky breath. "So much for old connections," he muttered, lips twisted in a grim smile. Megan sensed he was holding back a storm of emotions behind those guarded eyes: sorrow, disappointment, anger, and possibly relief. She squeezed his shoulder gently. "You okay?" Lucas closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling unevenly. "I will be," he whispered. But Megan couldn't tell if he believed it himself. That night, Heavy rain lashed against the estate's windows as Megan stayed late to check on Lucas. The emotional toll of Elena's visit had been as palpable as any physical strain. When Jordan, the physical therapist, finished the evening session, he informed Megan that Lucas's heart rate and blood pressure were slightly elevated. Stress, undoubtedly. She found Lucas in the sprawling library on the second floor, a place she'd never seen him visit before. Floor-to-ceiling shelves of leather-bound books, a classic globe in the corner, and a crackling fireplace created an atmosphere of quiet solemnity. Lucas stood by the shelves, gazing at the titles without really seeing them. Megan cleared her throat. "The staff said you skipped dinner. You need to keep your energy up, you know?" Lucas let out a soft, humorless chuckle. "That's the least of my worries tonight." He turned to her, lines of fatigue etched around his eyes. "I guess I haven't properly thanked you for staying late." "I don't mind," she said, stepping closer. "I wanted to make sure you're all right after everything. Stress can hit harder than any physical injury." He gave her a long, measured look. "I appreciate that, Megan. Really?" He hesitated, dropping his gaze to the floor. "I know I can be difficult. I see the way people around here tiptoe, afraid of my temper. You're one of the few who stands up to me." She shrugged, trying to hide the warmth creeping into her cheeks. "I'm used to handling stubborn patients, though you do set the bar high." A flicker of a smile crossed his lips, then quickly faded. "About Elena. I didn't expect her to show up. We were engaged for 2 years, but the relationship was always more about appearances and business connections than genuine love, I guess." He paused, as if the word felt unfamiliar on his tongue. "She left when my schedule and ambitions overshadowed everything else." Megan nodded, sensing a rare honesty. "It's not easy to have regrets, especially when you're already dealing with a traumatic event. But you're allowed to feel hurt." He exhaled slowly, crossing the library to sink into a leather armchair by the fire. She noticed the strain in his posture, the careful way he lowered himself, and it reminded her of his lingering physical fragility. "Doesn't help that every day I'm bombarded with legal threats and questions about the crash," he said, "and now Elena reappears, stirring up old wounds." Megan moved a spare chair closer, sitting across from him. Outside, thunder rumbled. The fireplace cast dancing shadows on the bookshelves. "Have you considered talking to someone professionally?" she asked gently. "A counselor or therapist might help you process all this." Lucas's gaze flicked up, surprise evident in his eyes. "I've never needed therapy before." "Maybe you do now," she said, not unkindly. "That's not a sign of weakness." His expression softened. "You really don't hold back, do you?" She shook her head. "Nope, not much point, anyway." For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Then he shifted his gaze to the tall windows, where the rain pelted the glass. "I had a dream the other night about the crash," he admitted quietly. "The feeling of falling, then the impact, the smell of smoke. I woke up shaking, convinced I was still trapped." Megan reached out, tentatively placing her hand atop his. "That's normal after trauma. Talking about it can help lessen the nightmares." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I suppose you've seen a lot of trauma in your line of work." "A fair amount, and I've learned that ignoring it doesn't make it vanish." She paused, voice softening. "What do you remember most from the crash?" Lucas stared into the fire, his face solemn. "The sense of helplessness. I'm used to controlling everything, my business, my schedule, my life. But in that moment, I had no control at all." Megan squeezed his hand, which he allowed without protest. "Control is an illusion, especially when accidents happen. You have to let go sometimes, rely on others." He exhaled slowly, turning his hand to link fingers with hers. The gesture felt strangely intimate, though neither of them commented on it directly. "You're right," he admitted, voice low. "I'm still not used to that, but I'm trying." Megan felt her heart flutter. In the dancing firelight, he seemed more open, more human. This was no longer just about bandages and painkillers. It was about soul-deep wounds and tentative steps toward healing. Just then, Amanda's voice echoed from the hallway. "Megan, are you still here?" Megan pulled her hand away gently, standing up. "In the library," she called. Amanda appeared, holding an umbrella. "The storm's getting worse. You might not want to drive home in this weather." Lucas looked at Megan, concern etched on his face. "Stay for a while longer. Wait for it to ease up." She glanced at the window, thunder still rolling. It wasn't safe to be on the roads. "All right," she agreed, trying to steady her racing thoughts. As Amanda left, Megan turned back to Lucas. Neither spoke the obvious, that the line between patient and caretaker was blurring. For now, though, the raging storm outside provided a shelter, brief but enough for them to share this small, unspoken understanding in the quiet warmth of the library. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving branches strewn across the estate's driveway. Megan woke in a guest bedroom that Amanda had prepared for her. She was grateful for the comfortable bed, though her dreams had been restless. Over breakfast in the grand kitchen, she observed Lucas sipping coffee at the table, his posture more relaxed than she'd ever seen. "I'm driving back to the station soon," she told him. "I'm still technically on call for emergencies today, but I'll return tonight to check on you." He set down his mug. "If it's all right with you, I was thinking of venturing out for a short walk around the property later. I could use some fresh air." Megan flashed a mild grin. "That's fine, as long as you don't overdo it. Maybe Amanda or one of the groundskeepers can come with you." Lucas nodded, though his eyes lingered on her a moment longer than necessary. "Thanks. And thanks for staying last night. It was safer than driving home," she said, leaving the deeper sentiment unsaid. Her drive back to the paramedic station felt surreal, the city now glistening under the morning sun. The overnight storm had scrubbed the skyline clean, and Megan found her own thoughts felt similarly fresh, but the sense of deeper undercurrents between her and Lucas weighed on her. At the station, Nancy Collins was waiting, arms crossed and brow furrowed. "I got a call from Mr. Foster's staff saying you stayed overnight due to the weather," she remarked. "Everything okay?" Megan nodded, removing her jacket. "Yes, the roads were dangerous. I took precautions. And yes, I stayed in a guest room." Nancy studied her carefully, a hint of concern in her eyes. "I understand the circumstances, but be mindful. People talk. I trust your professionalism. But the line between caretaker and personal involvement can get blurry." Megan exhaled slowly. "I know, I promise. I'm not crossing any lines. He still needs medical oversight." Nancy's expression softened. "All right, as long as you're sure." She laid a stack of folders on the desk. "Now, we've got a briefing in 10 minutes about new emergency protocols. Get yourself ready." Diving into station work felt almost like a relief. Megan assisted with routine calls, a minor burn here, a sprained ankle there, and each time the ambulance siren screamed through the Seattle streets, she remembered who she was at her core, a paramedic, there to help whoever needed it, no matter their social status. Yet by late afternoon, she realized she was checking her phone more often, wondering if Lucas had attempted to walk around the property, or if he'd run into some new meltdown with the media or his ex-fiancée. She tried to push the thoughts aside, reminding herself that he was just a patient, but deep down she couldn't ignore the flutter of concern that felt far too personal. Toward the end of her shift, her phone buzzed. It wasn't the station's dispatcher, but Amanda Carver. Megan answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Hello? Megan, I'm sorry to bother you. Lucas insisted on taking a walk beyond the garden, out near the wooded trail. He seemed fine at first, but security just radioed me that he's doubled over in pain. They can't convince him to come back inside until you're here. An instant jolt of worry surged through Megan. I'll be there as soon as I can. She reported the situation to Nancy, who gave a quick nod of approval. Go, he clearly needs you. Megan dashed to her car, ignoring the uncertain glances from some of her co-workers. The drive to the mansion felt like an eternity, though the afternoon traffic wasn't too bad. When she arrived, she found the security guard near the edge of a narrow path that led into a cluster of tall pines. He's just up ahead, wouldn't let us call an ambulance, the guard said, gesturing toward a bend in the path. Megan hurried along, her heart pounding. She soon spotted Lucas sitting on a low, moss-covered rock, breathing hard. His face was pale, and he clutched his side. Relief mingled with frustration as she approached him. "What were you thinking?" she demanded, kneeling beside him. "You're not ready for rough terrain." He grimaced, wiping sweat from his brow. "I just needed to prove to myself I could do something normal," he rasped. "It wasn't that far, but I got this sudden stab in my ribs." Megan quickly checked his vitals, pressing 2 fingers to his pulse. "Your heart rate is high, and you're trembling. That's shock, Lucas. We need to get you inside." She gestured for the guard to bring the wheelchair they'd brought along. Lucas resisted for a moment, eyes filled with stubborn pride. But the pain forced him to relent. "I was so close," he muttered through gritted teeth, "so close to feeling normal again." Helping him into the chair, Megan glanced at his anguished expression. She understood the desperation, the yearning to regain control of his life. But as she guided him back toward the house, she felt a subtle shift inside her. This was more than a professional duty. It was a shared struggle, a step toward the edge of something that neither of them could fully define. A week after Lucas's ill-fated walk in the woods, Megan found herself sitting across from him in the mansion's spacious den, the early morning sun filtering through tall windows. They had finished his breathing exercises and wound care check, but the tension in the room remained palpable. Lucas still hadn't fully recovered from pushing himself too hard, and the frustration was evident in how he tapped his fingers against the arm of his chair. Amanda Carver walked in, her demeanor calm yet purposeful. "Mr. Foster," she began, hesitating briefly when she saw Megan. "I have news from our legal team. They've requested a meeting this afternoon regarding the FAA's recent findings. There's potential liability on the table." Lucas let out a soft curse under his breath. "So they want to blame me for the crash, even though the official cause isn't finalized." Amanda grimaced. "It sounds like the pilot's family might pursue legal action, claiming you pressured him to fly on a tight schedule." Megan's stomach clenched at the mention of the pilot's family. She had never stopped to think about them, or the emotional toll of the crash on their side. "Did the pilot survive?" she asked quietly, recalling early reports that there might have been only Lucas on board. Lucas shook his head, expression dark. "He didn't make it. I was the only survivor." He looked away, swallowing hard. "I've been trying to avoid details about that." Megan's gaze fell to the hardwood floor. She could see how the guilt weighed on him, whether or not he was actually at fault. "If they sue," she said softly, "it could be just as much about compensation as it is about accountability." Lucas's voice trembled with anger. "I never forced him to do anything. I trusted the pilot's judgment. But once something like this hits the courts, public sympathy usually lands with the grieving family." Silence settled over them until Amanda cleared her throat. "The legal team will be here around 2. Would you like me to arrange for Ms. Baker to be present as well?" Lucas glanced at Megan. She could tell he was torn, as if not wanting to drag her into more of his legal battles, but he finally nodded. Yes, please. I need her perspective if they start rehashing the day of the crash. She was there when I was pulled out. Amanda made a note on her tablet and left quietly. Megan studied Lucas, noticing the tension in his hands. Are you sure you want me there? He exhaled, looking both weary and resolved. I trust you to tell the truth. If anyone tries to twist facts, maybe you can ground things in reality. She managed a small, supportive nod. Then I'll be there. That afternoon, the legal team arrived. 2 lawyers dressed in crisp suits, each carrying thick files and laptops. They set up in the den, turning it into a makeshift conference room. Lucas sat in a large leather armchair, while Megan took a seat at the corner of a grand desk, trying not to feel out of place among all the legal jargon. The lead attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Marjorie Fong, ran the meeting with brisk efficiency. She launched into a summary of the potential claims, allegations of undue pressure, pushing flight timelines, and a possible refusal to heed weather advisories. Lucas's jaw tightened with every new detail. Mr. Foster, she said, adjusting her glasses, your official stance is that you never instructed your pilot to fly in unsafe conditions. Is that correct? Yes, Lucas answered curtly. I run a tight schedule, but I never override safety. That's why I hire professionals, to make those calls. Marjorie glanced at Megan. You were the paramedic on site when Mr. Foster was rescued. Did you hear him say anything that might imply he took responsibility for the crash? Megan's pulse quickened. No. He was unconscious for most of it. When he did speak, it was only to ask if anyone else was hurt. He never said anything about forcing the flight. Marjorie scribbled notes on a pad. Good. That's consistent with his statement. Still, the pilot's family might claim he felt pressured. The only living witness to that conversation is Mr. Foster. Lucas shifted in his seat, grimacing slightly from the movement. And I have no reason to lie. I'm telling you, there was no conversation about ignoring safety. Marjorie offered him a tight smile. We'll do everything we can, but public perception could be harsh. We have to be ready for that. Settling might be the best option if they push forward with a wrongful death suit. A flicker of anguish passed over Lucas's face. I'm not opposed to supporting his family, but settling implies guilt. Megan stayed quiet, her gaze bouncing between Lucas and the attorneys. She could see how the very idea of admitting wrongdoing, even if just to expedite the case, weighed heavily on him. Pride and principle collided with the pragmatic reality of legal battles. As the discussion continued, the tension in the room thickened. Megan watched Lucas's breathing grow shallow. An all too familiar sign he might be pushing his physical limits. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. You need a break. He nodded, closing his eyes for a moment. Marjorie Fong sensed his discomfort and paused the meeting. We can resume in an hour, she said, gathering her files. Think about the settlement option. It might be your cleanest route. Once the lawyers left the room, Lucas exhaled shakily, massaging his temples. Megan hovered nearby, watching the shadows under his eyes deepen. I can't believe this is happening, he muttered. I survived a crash only to face this spiral. Megan squeezed his shoulder. Take it step by step. Focus on what you know to be true. No one can force you to settle if you feel it's wrong. His gaze softened, though stress etched every line of his face. You're a good anchor, Megan. Without you here, I'd probably explode. She managed a faint smile, but inside, she couldn't ignore the dull ache of empathy for the pilot's family, and for Lucas, who was caught in a whirlwind of accusations. This felt like a collision of their worlds, her role as a paramedic who saved him, and his role as a man fighting for his reputation. The repercussions of that crash extended far beyond twisted metal. It shattered more than just his physical body. In the days following the tense legal meeting, Megan noticed a change in Lucas's demeanor. He was quieter, more prone to long silences, as though replaying every angle of the pending lawsuit in his mind. Even his physical therapy sessions, once tinged with frustration, became listless. He moved through each exercise without his usual defiance. Late one afternoon, Megan found him alone in the mansion's conservatory, where sunbeams cut through the leafy canopy overhead. He was seated in a wheelchair this time, despite being able to walk short distances, as if he didn't trust himself not to stumble. His eyes were fixed on a potted orchid, vibrant purple against the glass walls. She approached cautiously, the wheels of her own rolling stool squeaking against the polished floor. "Lucas, you haven't said much lately? How's the pain?" He shrugged, eyes still on the orchid. "Manageable." "Anything I can do?" she asked softly. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then his hand rose, gesturing at the greenhouse-like surroundings. "This place used to relax me, some investment I made in exotic plants years ago. Now I just feel trapped. I can walk, but I'm not free to live as I want. I'm fighting lawsuits, investigations. I'm tired." Megan heard the raw vulnerability in his voice, and it tugged at her heart. She remembered what Emily had said about caution, about lines blurring. But in that moment, all she wanted was to ease his turmoil. "I understand," she said gently. "I really do. But healing is slow. It doesn't happen on anyone's schedule." He turned toward her, frustration and sadness mingling in his gaze. "You don't understand the pressure. My entire business empire rests on my shoulders. If I stumble, thousands of employees could lose their jobs. Investors will pull out. It's not just about me." She leaned forward. "I get that your responsibilities are huge, but pushing yourself too hard could end up costing even more. If your health deteriorates, you'll lose any chance of rebuilding." Lucas let out a ragged breath, pressing a hand to his side. "Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better if—" He paused, the words catching in his throat. "If the crash had been fatal." His voice was barely above a whisper, a confession he seemed almost ashamed to speak. A wave of alarm swept through Megan. "Don't say that," she replied, voice tight. "You survived for a reason. You have a chance to make things right, both for yourself and the people depending on you." His eyes glistened with moisture he wouldn't allow to fall. "Do I? Or am I just a burden to everyone, waiting for me to fail or pay them off?" She reached out, covering his hand with hers. "You're not a burden. You're a man who's been through a traumatic event. You have every right to feel overwhelmed. But I promise you, the fact that you survived means something." He stared at their joined hands, a war of emotions flickering across his features. Then, unexpectedly, footsteps echoed on the tiled floor, and they pulled apart. Amanda Carver appeared, her ever-present tablet in hand. She paused, taking in the scene, concern shadowing her face. "Sorry to interrupt," Amanda said gently, "but Dr. Henderson is on the line. He wants to schedule a follow-up." "He's worried about your mental and physical progress, Lucas." Lucas shook his head, clearing his throat. "I'll talk to him in a minute." Amanda nodded and retreated, leaving them alone once more. Megan noticed how Lucas's moment of vulnerability hardened back into guarded composure. She wondered if he would ever allow himself to fully acknowledge his pain, or if pride would remain his shield. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for listening." "Any time," she replied. "But you might want to consider getting professional counseling. It's not a sign of weakness to talk to someone who handles trauma cases." He grimaced. "I know that's your go-to suggestion lately." "Because it helps," she countered gently. "I've seen it work wonders. You're carrying a lot of guilt and fear that can't just vanish on its own." He didn't argue, which she took as a step forward. The hush of the conservatory wrapped around them like a fragile sanctuary, filled only with the distant hum of the estate's air system and the soft rustle of leaves. She wanted to wrap him in reassurance, but she also knew she couldn't fix him. All she could do was offer him the space to face his demons. Finally, Lucas lifted his gaze, voice steadier. "I'll think about it," he said. Then he forced a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "In the meantime, let's finish the therapy routine before Dr. Henderson gives me an earful." Megan nodded, understanding that she could only guide him so far. Each small step forward was a fragile triumph, overshadowed by the possibility of sliding back into despair. Still, she couldn't help but feel a fierce determination to see him through this, even if it meant facing her own vulnerabilities along the way. It was nearly midnight when Megan's phone buzzed, the vibration shuddering across her small kitchen counter. She had just gotten home from a double shift at the paramedic station, exhausted and ready to collapse into bed. Groaning softly, she glanced at the caller ID, and her pulse sped up when she saw Lucas's name. "Lucas," she answered, balancing the phone against her ear as she shrugged off her jacket. His voice came through thick with distress. "Megan, sorry to call so late. I need help." Alarm jolted her senses awake. "Is it your injuries? Are you in pain?" A short pause crackled in her ear. "Yes, but not just that," he admitted, sounding breathless. "I woke up from a nightmare, thought I could handle it. I tried walking downstairs for some water, but everything's spinning. I can't—" She didn't wait for him to finish. "I'm on my way. Stay where you are. Can you get someone in the house to help you sit down?" "No," he rasped. "Amanda's off for the evening, and the night staff is minimal. I can't call them. Don't want to cause a scene." Megan bit back an exasperated sigh. "Lucas, call them if you need to. Promise me you won't try to move around too much." He didn't respond immediately. Finally, he mumbled, "I'll stay put." Hanging up, Megan grabbed her keys and hurried out the door. Her car tore through the quiet Seattle streets, headlights carving tunnels in the darkness. She forced herself not to imagine worst-case scenarios, him collapsing, hitting his head, or aggravating his injuries. Her heart hammered with a personal urgency she usually reserved for ambulance calls. When she reached the mansion, a tired security guard opened the gate, recognizing her. She dashed inside, ignoring the grandeur of the foyer as she raced upstairs, guided by dim, motion-activated lights. At the far end of the corridor, she found Lucas half-seated against a wall, breathing raggedly. "Oh my God!" she gasped, rushing to kneel beside him. "Lucas, why didn't you call someone?" He gave a weak chuckle that devolved into a cough. "I did! I called you!" Her pulse still thudding, she slid an arm under his shoulder to help him up. "Let's get you to bed, or a chair," she said, scanning his face for signs of severe distress. He nodded feebly, letting her guide him into his bedroom. She flicked on a bedside lamp, setting a soft glow over the large space. He sank onto the mattress, leaning forward with his head in his hands. "Nightmares," he muttered. "I keep dreaming about the crash." Megan swallowed the lump in her throat. She'd known he was struggling, but seeing him so shaken drove the point home. She pulled a small flashlight from her bag and checked his pupils. Any dizziness, blurred vision. He closed his eyes. "It's better now that you're here." She pressed 2 fingers to his wrist, counting his pulse. It was elevated, though not dangerously. His skin glistened with sweat, and she could feel the tremble in his arms. "Lucas, you've been pushing too hard. Your body is screaming for rest. And these nightmares, you need to talk to someone." He looked up, expression raw. "I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on physical therapy, the lawsuit, everything else. I can't," his voice cracked, "I can't keep acting like I'm invincible." Gently, she brushed damp hair from his forehead. "You don't have to be," she said softly. It's okay to need help. He clutched her hand, desperation shining in his eyes. I'm sorry for dragging you here. I didn't know who else. She squeezed back, heart pounding with an emotion that felt far beyond mere professional concern. Don't apologize. I told you I'm here for you. Let's get you calm. Then we'll discuss next steps. Despite his fatigue, he managed a nod. Megan helped him breathe slowly in and out, guiding him through a relaxation technique she often taught trauma survivors. Gradually, his pulse steadied, and the tremors in his hands subsided. After several minutes, he leaned back against the headboard, still clutching her fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. "You always know what to say." In the dimly lit room, Megan felt a rush of warmth that went beyond sympathy. Their eyes met, and the tension that had been building for weeks finally broke. Lucas's hand tugged her closer, and before she knew what was happening, their lips brushed, a fleeting, tremulous kiss that carried a whirlwind of fear, gratitude, and pent-up longing. She pulled back, heart hammering. A swirl of guilt flooded her mind, crossing a line she'd tried so hard to respect, but the look on Lucas's face was one of open vulnerability, not regret. "Megan," he breathed, voice shaky. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." She shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. "No, it's me. I let it happen." They locked gazes for a beat that felt endless. Emotions crackled between them, relief, confusion, and a tender empathy that had been growing in the shadows. Finally, she exhaled and stood. "You need rest. I'll stay here until you're settled. Make sure you don't have another dizzy spell." He nodded slowly, too exhausted to argue. She dimmed the lamp, pulling the blankets up to his waist. As he closed his eyes, Megan tried to steady her own racing thoughts, uncertain of where this step would lead them. All she knew was that the barrier between caregiver and patient had crumbled in that single kiss, leaving them both vulnerable in uncharted territory. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows of Lucas's bedroom, revealing dust motes dancing in the morning air. Megan had dozed in a chair beside his bed, fully clothed from her late arrival. She blinked awake when she heard a soft knock at the door. Amanda peered in, eyes widening at the sight of Megan curled up. Her gaze darted to Lucas, who was stirring beneath the covers. "Should I come back later?" she asked in a hushed tone. Megan stretched, rubbing her stiff neck. "It's fine. Come in." Lucas shifted, propping himself up on one elbow. He glanced at Megan, a flurry of emotions passing across his face, fondness, embarrassment, uncertainty, before he turned to Amanda. "Is everything all right?" Amanda cleared her throat. "Dr. Henderson is on the line, asking about your condition. He got a text from Miss Baker last night about a dizzy spell." Megan rose, smoothing her clothes. She had indeed messaged Dr. Henderson to keep him updated, not wanting to delay professional advice. "You should talk to him," she told Lucas gently. He nodded. "Amanda, I'll take the call in a few minutes." She gave him a curious look, but left without pressing for details. The moment the door closed, an uneasy silence settled between Megan and Lucas. They both remembered the previous night's emotional upheaval, the sudden intimacy that had blossomed in the darkness. Lucas raked a hand through his hair, then looked at her. "Megan, about last night?" Her cheeks warmed, but she tried to keep her composure. "We were both emotional, tired. It just happened." She forced a small, uncertain smile. "We don't have to talk about it now if you're not ready." He shook his head. "I think we should, or we'll never get past the awkwardness." Sitting up straighter, he willed a steady calm into his voice. "I don't regret it, but I know this complicates things. You're still my medical caregiver, and I'm, well, me." His self-description hung in the air. Megan understood what he meant. A wealthy man with legal troubles, physical injuries, and an uncertain future. She walked closer, hands clasped in front of her. Maybe we just acknowledge it happened and be honest with each other from here on. He studied her face. I need honesty, Megan. People around me usually tell me what they think I want to hear. She inhaled deeply, sensing an important crossroad. Then here's the truth. I care about you, and it's more than professional. I know that breaks every rule I set for myself, and it scares me because you're still vulnerable. Lucas's eyes shone with an emotion she couldn't name. I care about you too. You've seen me at my worst, and you never flinched. Before she could respond, the phone on the nightstand buzzed, reminding them of Dr. Henderson's call. Lucas sighed and picked it up, gesturing for Megan to stay. She settled back into the chair as he spoke with the doctor, quietly reporting the events of the previous night. He mentioned nightmares, dizziness, and Megan's quick response. The conversation was brief, ending with a plan for a more thorough checkup. After hanging up, Lucas let out a breath. He wants me to come in for another scan, just to be safe. Megan nodded. That makes sense. He gazed at her, the corners of his mouth tipping into a hesitant smile. Would you stay? Accompany me for the checkup? She paused, resisting the urge to overthink. Yes, I'll stay. Later that afternoon, Megan accompanied Lucas to the hospital, where Dr. Henderson arranged for a quick imaging procedure. As they waited in a small lounge, Megan could see the tension in Lucas's posture. Hospitals were a stark reminder of the crash and everything he'd lost: mobility, peace of mind, sense of invincibility. When they called his name, she gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. I'll be here when you're done. He nodded, then disappeared behind the automated doors. Megan sat alone, observing the bustle of doctors, nurses, and patients. Memories of her first introduction to Lucas came flooding back, pulling him from the wreckage, feeling his faint pulse under her fingers. She never imagined this would lead to an emotional entanglement. Half an hour later, Lucas re-emerged, a small bandage on his arm, where they'd inserted an IV for contrast. His expression was guarded, but not panicked. Dr. Henderson wants me to wait for the results, he said. We can talk in his office. They walked to the doctor's office, side by side, a quiet solidarity between them. Lucas no longer used a wheelchair, another sign of progress. Once inside, Dr. Henderson motioned for them to sit. There's no major setback evident on the scans, he reported. Your healing is on track, but your body's under considerable stress. Elevated blood pressure, signs of fatigue. Lucas exhaled, relieved. So I'm not unraveling completely. The doctor offered a reassuring smile. No, but you do need to manage your stress. That includes dealing with insomnia, nightmares, legal pressure, everything. Have you considered my recommendation about therapy? Lucas glanced at Megan, who nodded slightly. I'm more open to it now, he admitted. Dr. Henderson seemed pleased. Good. I can refer you to a trauma specialist if you'd like, Lucas agreed quietly, and Megan felt a wave of relief wash over her. She realized she had been holding her breath, worried that the scan might reveal new complications. As Dr. Henderson finalized their visit, Megan and Lucas exchanged a look that spoke volumes about how intertwined their paths had become. On the way out, Lucas slipped a hand around her arm, guiding her gently through the hallway. Neither of them said much, but the gesture was charged with unspoken understanding. Paths converging indeed, Megan thought, as she recognized that they were no longer simply paramedic and patient. They were two people forging a fragile connection amidst the chaos of tragedy and uncertainty. Back at the mansion, the afternoon sun stretched across the polished floors of the ground foyer. Lucas walked with a steadier step, but Megan kept a watchful eye on him, ready to intervene if he faltered. After the hospital visit, she sensed his spirits had lifted slightly, buoyed by the good news that his body was still on the mend. They settled in his study, a room lined with books about finance, leadership, and biographies of famous entrepreneurs. Lucas lowered himself into a leather chair behind an imposing mahogany desk. Megan took a seat across from him, her posture relaxed yet alert. He laced his fingers together and leaned forward. "Thank you for coming with me, Megan. I know it's not part of your regular job description to accompany me to every appointment." She waved off his thanks. "I'm partly responsible for making sure you follow through with medical advice, and, well, I wanted to be there." His gaze softened. "I'm grateful. I wanted to tell you something." He paused, anxiety flickering across his expression. "My attorney's scheduled a preliminary hearing next week with the pilot's family's lawyer. They'll discuss the potential lawsuit, evidence, settlement options, everything." Megan felt a twist of sympathy. "That soon?" He nodded. "Yes, and I might need your testimony down the line. They'll want your account of my condition at the crash site." She recalled the grisly scene, the wreckage, his unconscious form pinned by twisted metal. "Of course. I'll tell them everything I saw." Lucas stared at the wood grain of the desk, running a thumb over a deep scratch that hinted at an old accident. "There's something else. The pilot's widow reached out, wanting to meet me privately. She claims she just wants closure, but my lawyers are torn. They worry it's a trap, a way to gather information or emotion they can use in court." Megan's heart tugged. She lost her husband. If she's genuine, maybe hearing from you would bring her some peace. He shrugged, pain evident in his eyes. "Or maybe it'll make her angrier. I'm not sure I can handle that right now." Pushing her chair closer, Megan leaned in. "You can decide whether to see her or not. But from my experience, sometimes it helps to face people's grief head-on instead of letting it fester." He breathed out slowly, eyes flicking to her. "And what about your grief, Megan?" he asked softly. "You mentioned once you'd been through a rough breakup, some trauma in your past. I've never pressed for details, but I can see the weight you carry." Her pulse thumped, the abrupt shift catching her off guard. "That's not exactly the same," she mumbled, glancing away. My ex struggled with addiction. It ended badly. I poured so much into saving him, I forgot to save myself. I guess I carry guilt for not being able to help more." Lucas seemed to consider this, sympathy touching his features. "You saved me," he pointed out quietly. "Maybe this time is different." She felt a surge of emotion, remembering Emily's caution that she could lose herself again by trying too hard to fix someone else. But with Lucas, the connection felt mutual, as though they were both stumbling through darkness, finding their footing together. Before she could respond, Amanda entered the study, a discreet knock preceding her. "Mr. Foster, your legal team is on a conference call. They need a quick update on the hearing preparations." Lucas nodded, then looked to Megan apologetically. "I'll be right there. Could you wait for me?" Megan managed a reassuring smile. "Of course." Amanda ushered him out, leaving Megan alone in the quiet study. She let her gaze wander across the shelves stacked with economic theories and motivational tomes. There was something profoundly lonely about this room, a testament to Lucas's relentless drive, his success built at the cost of genuine human connection. 15 minutes later, Lucas returned, shoulders tense. "They want me to consider a settlement again," he said, the words tinged with bitterness. To avoid the risk of a prolonged trial and public scrutiny, she stood, meeting him halfway across the room. "What do you want?" he snorted, half laughing. "That's the question I keep dodging. I want peace. I want to move on. But I don't want to admit fault for something that wasn't my doing." Carefully, she placed a hand on his arm. Maybe meeting with the widow, hearing her out, would help you decide. It might give you both some closure. He studied her fingers against the fabric of his shirt. Then, slowly, he covered her hand with his own. Megan, thank you for everything. She felt her chest tighten. Even as the turbulence of the lawsuit loomed, a calm surrounded them in that moment. Their eyes locked, and the uncertainty that usually tugged at her stomach was replaced by a sense of rightness. This was a trial of the heart, not just about guilt or innocence, but about bravery in the face of loss and adversity. Outside, the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the estate grounds. In that hush, Megan realized that no matter the outcome of the hearing, their bond had grown too strong to ignore. They stood at the threshold of a deeper understanding, ready to confront whatever storms lay ahead together. Megan arrived at the mansion early that morning, steeling herself for what might be one of the most difficult days of Lucas's recovery. They had arranged for a private meeting with Lydia Shaw, the widow of the pilot who had perished in the crash. Although the hearing was still a few days away, Lydia's attorney had relented to a personal conversation, provided everything remained civil. The estate felt unusually still. Normally, Amanda Carver greeted Megan at the door, phone in hand, listing off Lucas's schedule for the day. But the front hall was empty, except for the faint sound of classical music drifting from a distant speaker. Megan paused, listening to the soft notes that gave the cavernous space a haunting warmth. She found Lucas in the main sitting room, pacing near the large bay windows. He looked up, tension etched in his face. "You're here," he breathed, a trace of relief coloring his tone. Megan nodded, setting her light jacket aside. "How are you holding up?" "Trying to focus," he said, running a hand through his dark hair that was still damp from a shower. "She's supposed to arrive soon. My lawyers advised me not to say anything that could be used against me, but I just—" He cut himself off, pressing his lips into a thin line. "I'm not sure how to handle this." She stepped closer, resting a hand on his forearm. "Be honest, but be respectful. Let her speak. She lost someone she loved." His eyes flickered with guilt. "I know." For a moment, he fell silent, staring at the garden outside. "I keep reliving that day, wondering if I missed any warning signs. Could I have told the pilot to take a different route or to delay the flight? I run through the possibilities over and over." Before Megan could respond, the doorbell echoed. Lucas tensed, nodding at Amanda, who had quietly stepped into the room, to show Lydia in. Moments later, Lydia Shaw entered. She was a petite woman in her late 30s, wearing a simple black coat. Her expression was a mix of apprehension and determination. Lucas gestured to a sofa. "Mrs. Shaw, please have a seat." She complied, carefully smoothing the coat as though it offered protection. Megan noticed the faint tremor in her hands. "Mr. Foster," Lydia began, her voice carrying the weight of pent-up grief. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Lucas cleared his throat. "It's the least I could do. I'm deeply sorry about what happened to your husband. I hope you know that." Lydia's eyes glimmered with unshed tears. She folded and refolded her hands in her lap before speaking. "James loved flying. He took pride in his job, said it was an honor to pilot you around. He felt valued, respected, at least for a while." A muscle in Lucas's jaw twitched. "He was an excellent pilot," he said quietly. "I never doubted his skill." Lydia took a measured breath. "That day, do you remember anything about a weather alert or scheduling concerns?" "He called me before the flight, seemed uneasy about the timing, but he never said you forced him." Lucas winced. "If he had expressed real concern, I would have postponed. I'm meticulous about my schedule." "Yes, but I wouldn't—" His voice cracked. "I wouldn't risk lives for convenience." Lydia studied him. The silence stretched. and Megan could almost feel the intensity of the emotions swirling between them. Finally, Lydia said, "I want to believe you." Tears slipped down Lydia's cheeks, and she roughly brushed them away. When the investigators started pointing fingers, it became this monster I didn't know how to manage. People said James was incompetent or that you were reckless. None of it felt right. Lucas's knuckles whitened. "I'm sorry the press turned it into a circus. If there was anything I could have done to save him..." Lydia inhaled shakily. "I know you tried to save yourself that day, and you survived. Maybe that's what haunts me. Why did he have to die?" Lucas bowed his head. Megan's chest tightened at the raw sorrow in the room. She reached out, gently placing a hand on Lydia's arm. "It's not about fault right now," Megan murmured, voice trembling with empathy. "It's about acknowledging his life and loss. Maybe that's the first step forward." Lydia nodded, pressing her lips together. "He didn't come to accuse you, Mr. Foster. The lawsuit, that's the lawyer's domain. I just needed to see you, to know whether James's final flight was truly forced. If I'd found you indifferent or callous, I would have known how to feel." Lucas struggled to find words, his voice raw when he finally spoke. "I'd never disregard a pilot's expertise. Your husband was a good man. That day, it wasn't supposed to happen this way." A hush settled over them. Outside, the manicured garden looked deceptively peaceful under the morning light. Lydia slowly stood, gathering her composure. "I needed to hear that. Thank you." Lucas rose, unsteady but resolute. He extended a hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Lydia accepted. They stood face to face, two people connected by a tragedy that neither could fully comprehend or undo. The handshake lingered a beat too long, carrying unspoken grief and a mutual recognition that the crash had left permanent marks on both their lives. Without another word, Lydia withdrew her hand and turned to leave, her steps echoing in the silent foyer. Amanda followed her out, shutting the door quietly behind them. Megan watched Lucas sink back onto the sofa, shoulders sagging. He buried his face in his hands, every breath coming shallow and shaky. Gently, she sat beside him, laying a supportive arm across his back. She knew no words could erase the heartache of that meeting, but the fact that it happened at all felt like a step towards something. Maybe not healing in the traditional sense, but a fragile form of understanding. For the next few days, the atmosphere at the mansion felt like the eye of a storm, calm on the surface, charged with anticipation. The preliminary hearing was set to begin soon, and Lucas's legal team worked around the clock preparing documents, witness lists, and potential settlement strategies. Amanda tiptoed through the halls, efficiently juggling phone calls and scheduling tasks, while paramedics from Megan's station covered her shifts whenever she needed to be at Lucas's side. On a crisp morning just before the hearing, Megan arrived to find Lucas in an upstairs study, reviewing papers with Derek Sinclair, his financial advisor. Their tones were hushed but urgent. Derek glanced up, offering Megan a cordial nod. "Ms. Baker," he said, stepping aside, "I was just going over some final numbers with Mr. Foster regarding the possible settlement. We're trying to ensure no matter how this pans out, the company remains stable." Megan placed her bag on a nearby chair. "I see. I'll keep out of the legal side. I'm just here to support him in whatever he needs medically." Lucas offered her a weary smile. "And maybe emotionally," he admitted, exhaling slowly. "I'm trying to keep it together, but my nights, they're still filled with nightmares." Derek cleared his throat, looking between them. "I'll leave you two alone. Just remember, we have that conference call in an hour." With a polite dip of his head, he slipped out. Megan crossed the room, noticing the tension in Lucas's posture, muscles rigid, shoulders raised. "You're carrying all of this," she said quietly, Has your physical therapy fallen by the wayside? Lucas let out a humorless laugh. It feels trivial compared to the looming court battle. But yes, I've been skipping a few sessions. That's not good, Megan chided gently. Your body won't heal itself. You still have limitations, and ignoring them can cause permanent damage. He ran a hand across the stubble on his jaw. Honestly, everything feels secondary to clearing my name. But I guess I can't walk into a courtroom hunched over in pain. Doesn't inspire confidence. She pressed her lips together to hide a smile. No, it doesn't. Let's do some stretches now. You have 15 minutes before that call. Rising from his chair, Lucas allowed her to guide him through gentle side bends and shoulder rolls. She watched as he closed his eyes, trying to synchronize his breath with each movement. The lines on his forehead eased slightly. Have you given more thought to therapy? Megan asked between stretches. Lucas opened his eyes, a flicker of self-consciousness crossing his features. I spoke to Dr. Henderson. He recommended someone who specializes in trauma. I might set up an appointment after the hearing. He let out a slow, measured breath. But until then, you're the closest thing I have to a counselor. Megan gently placed a hand on his shoulder, applying a light, reassuring pressure. I'm happy to help, but remember that real counseling is a different realm. You deserve professional support. He nodded, lowering his gaze. I know. One step at a time. Just then, the distinctive ring of the house phone echoed through the study. Lucas stiffened, as though bracing for more bad news. Amanda's voice came over the intercom. Mr. Foster, your legal team is on the line. He picked up, meeting Megan's eyes before turning away. The conversation was terse, laden with legal terminology and references to depositions. Megan quietly continued organizing his therapy notes, trying to give him as much privacy as possible. Yet, she couldn't help overhearing snatches, references to the pilot's record, mechanical reports, financial liability. Each snippet underscored the precariousness of Lucas's situation. When he finally hung up, Lucas spun his chair toward her, rubbing the back of his neck. They want me to consider a more generous settlement. They think we can avoid a drawn-out trial if I pay a substantial sum to the pilot's widow. Megan searched his face. How do you feel about that? His jaw clenched. I'm willing to provide for her if she needs it, but it sticks in my throat to do it as a hush-money deal. Yet fighting could drag on for months, tarnishing my reputation further, whether I'm innocent or not. She placed the folder of therapy notes on the desk, stepping closer. Whatever decision you make, I'll respect it. But weigh your peace of mind too. Is it worth the emotional cost to fight it out in court if settlement brings closure? He inhaled a shaky breath, nodding. I keep thinking about that meeting with Lydia. She didn't seem vindictive, just devastated. Maybe offering her financial security is a kindness, not an admission of guilt. Her gaze softened. You can choose to see it that way. Outside, the late winter wind rattled the windows, hinting at shifting weather. That small gust seemed to mirror the changes swirling through Lucas's life. Every conversation, every decision felt like a tightrope walk between moral conviction and pragmatic necessity. Megan stayed by his side, quietly reinforcing that he wasn't alone, even if the world outside cast him as the villain or the scapegoat. He reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Thank you, he murmured. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in paperwork and guilt. Then you remind me there's air to breathe. She couldn't hide the emotion in her eyes. I'm here. With those words, she reassured not only him, but also herself. Together, they faced the unsettled winds of change, hoping to emerge stronger, whatever the outcome of the looming legal battle might be. On the morning of the hearing, Lucas, dressed in a tailored navy suit, carefully easing his recovering arm through the jacket sleeve. Megan waited in the foyer, wearing a conservative black blazer and slacks. She had offered to be there in case he needed any medical support or a steady presence. The hush of the house felt charged with significance, as though everyone sensed the turning point arriving. Nancy Collins had granted Megan the time off from her paramedic duties for this day, having grown more supportive once she realized how entwined Megan's role had become in Lucas's convalescence. That morning, Nancy's parting words echoed in Megan's mind. "Do what you have to, but remember where your home base is. We'll be here for you." When Lucas descended the sweeping staircase, Megan noted the faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. She stepped forward to offer him a stabilizing arm. "Deep breaths," she reminded him. He forced a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Right, the famous paramedic remedy." They departed the mansion in a black SUV, driven by a discreet security guard. The city streets rolled by in a blur, skyscrapers reflecting the pale winter sun. Megan could feel Lucas's tension in the silence that filled the car. At one point, she slid her hand into his, interlacing their fingers. He gripped it with a quiet desperation, as if drawing strength from her presence. At the courthouse, reporters stood behind barricades, cameras flashing as soon as Lucas stepped out of the vehicle. A swarm of voices shouted questions. Megan's pulse pounded, but she maintained a firm grasp on Lucas's arm, helping him navigate the chaos. Derek Sinclair and Marjorie Fong, the lead attorney, met them at the entrance, guiding them through the marble-floored lobby to a private waiting room. Lydia Shaw and her lawyer were already inside. Lydia looked visibly drained, but she gave Lucas and Megan a polite nod, her eyes flickering with recognition. For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then Marjorie cleared her throat and gestured for them to sit around a large conference table. "Before we proceed with the official hearing," Marjorie began, "both parties have one last opportunity to discuss settlement terms." Lydia's lawyer folded her hands. "My client wants assurances that Mr. Foster accepts financial responsibility for the loss she has suffered." Lucas's gaze darted to Lydia, who watched him with a guarded expression. "I can offer a settlement that ensures she and her children are provided for," he said slowly, voice tight with emotion. "But I can't admit fault for something that remains an unresolved accident. I didn't cause it." A subdued hush followed his words. Megan noticed the flicker of empathy in Lydia's eyes, but also the determination that fueled her claim. Lydia's lawyer leaned in, ready to counter, but Lydia raised a hand. "Let me speak," she requested, voice tremulous yet firm. She turned to Lucas. "I don't blame you for the crash, not personally. James was proud of his work, and he wouldn't have flown if he believed it was suicidal. But my children and we're struggling. Losing him shattered our family in a way nothing else can fix." Lucas nodded, swallowing hard. "I can't bring him back. If money can make it easier for you to move forward, I'll provide it. It's not about silencing you. It's about doing what I can." Lydia's eyes glistened. "I accept that. And in return, I'll withdraw any suggestion that you forced his hand. I only want it stated clearly that James wasn't incompetent, that no single factor caused this tragedy. I don't want his name tarnished." Marjorie leaned toward Lucas, whispering about the implications, but he raised his hand gently, mimicking Lydia's gesture. "I'll agree to that," he said, voice unsteady, "publicly if necessary." The tension in the room eased, replaced by a fragile sense of unity. Megan exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. It wasn't a neat resolution, no official verdict declaring innocence or guilt, but it felt human, empathetic. Both sides recognized the crash as a complex tragedy rather than a black-and-white scenario. An official stepped in. signaling it was time to move to the hearing chamber for final formalities. Lydia gave Lucas one last look, nodding her appreciation. Megan watched them exit, relief washing over her at the thought that, for once, a legal fight might not devolve into endless acrimony. Lucas slumped into a chair, massaging his ribcage. Megan moved behind him, laying a reassuring hand on his shoulder. She leaned down to speak near his ear, voice low enough for only him to hear. "I'm proud of you." He closed his eyes, covering her hand with his. "I couldn't have done it alone." Even as they prepared for the next stage, signing documents, making official statements, and facing whatever questions came from the court, Megan sensed a milestone had been reached. A glimmer of closure sparkled on the horizon, even if the path leading there had been filled with turbulence. Together, they would carry the torch forward, guided by the understanding born from shared pain and an unspoken hope for redemption on both sides. The official hearing concluded in a few short hours, much to everyone's surprise. The settlement terms were recorded, Lydia Shaw's primary concerns addressed, and the court acknowledged there was insufficient evidence to pin fault squarely on Lucas. Public interest in the case began to wane once a statement was released, indicating a respectful agreement had been reached. Gossip columns moved on to the next scandal, and the paparazzi lost interest in someone who no longer provided fiery headlines. A week later, Megan visited Lucas for what she assumed would be a routine check. She found him standing at the edge of the garden, gazing out across a manicured lawn, alive with fresh spring buds. The shift of seasons mirrored the subtle thaw in his demeanor, less tension around the eyes, fewer sharp edges in his voice. She approached quietly, the crisp scent of newly turned soil filling her nostrils. "It's looking beautiful out here," she remarked, taking in rows of vibrant tulips and blossoming shrubs. Lucas nodded. "Amanda hired a new landscaping team. Says it's good for me to see growth instead of decay. Maybe she's right." Megan smiled. "I think so. How are you feeling physically?" He turned to her, and she noticed how he moved with greater ease, the limp nearly gone. "Much stronger. I've been keeping up with physical therapy, and my pain is minimal now." "Any nightmares?" she asked gently. He paused, a rueful twist to his lips. "Sometimes. But I've started seeing a trauma counselor. It helps to talk about it, as you said." Megan's heart warmed at the admission. She nodded, stepping closer until they stood side by side. "I'm glad. You've come a long way." He ran a hand over the bark of a nearby tree. "Couldn't have done it without you. You know that, right?" She lowered her gaze. "You would have found a way, but I'm happy I could help." For a moment, she recalled her own hesitations, the fear of overstepping professional boundaries. Now, in the hush of the garden, that worry felt distant. They'd forged a connection built on trust, shared hardship, and unspoken affection. Lucas exhaled, the midday sun highlighting a faint scar near his temple. "I've been thinking about what comes next. With the lawsuit settled, I can refocus on business, but I don't want to fall into the same traps, working myself to the bone, isolating everyone who cares." Megan reached out, tentatively taking his hand. "So don't. You can use that drive in healthier ways, maybe even channel some of your resources into causes you believe in." He tilted his head, curiosity in his eyes. "Any suggestions?" She smiled, recalling the night they spoke about emergency services. Invest in paramedic units, upgrade hospital equipment, fund trauma awareness. You've seen firsthand how critical those services are. His features softened, admiration flickering across them. "That's a good idea." They strolled along the garden path, passing an ornate fountain that shimmered in the sunlight. Birds fluttered nearby, their calls creating a gentle soundtrack. Megan felt the tension in her chest ease with each step, aware that the worst of the storm had passed. Lucas paused near a low stone bench, gesturing for her to sit. He joined her, clasping her hands in his. The conversation had fallen silent, but the quiet hum of life around them spoke volumes. Eventually, he broke the stillness. I used to think letting people in was a weakness, that leaning on someone would slow me down, compromise my ambitions. He gave a wry laugh. It took a plane crash to show me I was wrong. Her throat tightened with emotion. Sometimes it takes something drastic to make us see what we've been missing. They sat there, the sun warming their backs, each reflecting on the paths that had led them here. He, an ambitious millionaire who nearly lost everything in a single moment. She, a paramedic who'd once been trapped by her own grief and guilt over not saving someone she loved. And somehow, amidst the rubble of his crash and the baggage of her past, they'd found a fragile yet potent bond. At length, Lucas glanced at her, a new steadiness in his gaze. I want to move forward, Megan, not just with my recovery or the business, but with you, if you'll have me. Her breath caught, heart-pounding. She thought of Emily's warnings, Nancy's watchful eye, and the professional lines she'd been so careful to maintain. Yet in that moment, none of it mattered more than the gentle conviction in Lucas's eyes. She squeezed his hands, her own shaking with a swirl of excitement and trepidation. I'd like that, she whispered, meeting his gaze. I really would. They didn't need grand declarations or promises. The quiet acceptance spoke volumes, a testament to the journeys each had traveled. Nearby, the fountain trickled softly, its water sparkling in the bright afternoon light, an echo of renewal and gentle possibility. Megan closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun and the comforting weight of Lucas's hands reassure her. Somewhere behind them, inside that vast mansion, responsibilities and routines awaited. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, aware that a new horizon stretched before them, uncertain, yes, but also brimming with hope for whatever came next. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.